from Joe about whether he was going to be remote or in person. I'll give a minute to him. I know that parking's a little tight, and then I'll call to order. Ross will not be here tonight, so I don't know if there's FinCom people on, if Jeannie's on to call anyone to order, but Ed is
Ed Ross is
traveling.
wearing a suit on Zoom, man.
It's on.
Oh, he
yeah,
is.
it's
Oh, you're on Zoom.
yeah.
Okay. You told me you weren't sure.
Something like TV for you.
So Jackie is on.
So that's still
Right,
only
But
3
you're
of us.
at 4 right now with Jackie, right?
So me, Jackie, Jeff. Yeah. So we need one more for quorum. I think, right? We would need Jeannie or somebody or Joe when he gets here.
Yep.
Jackie, is Joe McDonough being remote today, or is he just on his way?
I do not see him on Zoom. I do see Sean on Zoom.
Right. He told me he would be remote. Okay. Well, it's 7 o'clock, so let me just bring up my agenda. We'll call the RAC to order tonight on Tuesday, March 29th. So I don't know, I want to ask the 2 select board members, since we're on a subcommittee under the select board, if we take agenda items out of order, is it select board policy to take a vote? I was asked if I could swap the order of the Reading Public Schools and the town presentations this evening. And so what I'd like to, we have to follow that procedure.
We usually get a sense of the board only, just to see if it's okay.
So is everybody okay with the town manager going ahead of the schools? Will?
Thumbs up.
Okay. So in the changed order, our agenda items tonight will be first, we've called to order public comment, if any. The town manager will have a water sewer presentation / discussion. The superintendent will have a Reading Public Schools presentation and discussion. Both of these are related to possible uses of the ARPA funds. And in the packet, and over the week, various RAC committee members have submitted items to be added. This is just obviously a rough list and not a final list, just suggestions, and then we can go over some of those items and then see how they get categorized. Another topic we had mentioned having last week that we would get to tonight is maybe an evaluation criteria for when we look at these, and it may be, do we want to categorize them, timeliness, who they're benefiting, and those aren't the criteria. We're going to develop them. We also had homework that hopefully we can get to tonight, which was to come up with survey questions, and I have a set. I cheated a little and looked at Melrose and found some other ones so we can look at as a start and add everyone's. Then future agenda items, minutes, and adjourn. So before we get to the town manager's presentation, which again is out of order, is there any public comment? Jackie, is there any on your end? Any hands raised?
I don't have any hands raised.
Okay, and the public, if they're here in the, as the items come up, I'll recognize questions. Okay, Vanessa, you can proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. Jackie, if you could pull up the presentation, that'd be great. Excellent. Next slide, please. So to anyone that is watching, I just wanted to first kind of reintroduce this idea. The idea of the buckets, I think, is something that we've talked about for a while, right? I mean, as a first step in the conversation for ARPA, in my opinion, this represents what I'm hearing from the community. So I mentioned in the last meeting that water or sewer rates is something that keeps coming up in just about every conversation that I have. The importance of school priorities, prioritizing athletics and recreation, and then finally what we're terming as community priorities. In my opinion, the dollar amounts are placeholders, obviously, and to be defined by this committee, but it was an approach to start, the conversation of buckets. Next slide, please. Obviously, tonight I'll be focusing on one bucket in particular, and that is the water and sewer bucket. Next slide, please, Jackie. So the first thing that I want to talk about, and obviously it's kind of small to read, but on October 25, 2021, Reading had a special town meeting, and I'll give a very quick background. I wasn't there, obviously, but I'm sure a few of the folks here in the room were. We received funding from town meeting to replace the Auburn water tank. The Auburn water tank, for several reasons, came in over budget, and our town manager and select board approached town meeting to increase the appropriation by $2.5 million. Next slide, Jackie. So on the next slide, essentially it shows the reasons for the increase and the additional request of $2.5 million. Essentially, the majority of the cost was on increases on the water tank itself. Next slide, Jackie.
Hold on, Fidel.
Go ahead.
You need to call FinCom to order. You're at 5 now.
Okay, I could let Ed, Joe McDonough's here, so if you want to call FinCom to order, excuse me, Jack, if Ed's still on.
Yep, thanks, Marianne. I'll call FinCom to order. 7:08. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Fidel.
No problem. Thank you. Next slide, Jackie. And essentially, this is what I believe passed. So essentially, it's a town meeting with a motion made by Ed Ross, approved the additional expense, and recommended that $500,000 of the $2.5 million be funded from water reserves, and the $2 million be authorized to bond. However, town meeting added two clauses, right? One, of course, was for the select board, town manager, and or other agencies to apply for grants to subsidize this cost, or, and that's the reason why I'm including this in the presentation, is to cover a portion of the cost by using ARPA funds, and this is the motion that passed. Before any further discussion, I just wanted to put this front and center, since it was a motion that passed in the special town meeting in October of 2021. I wasn't there, so if anyone wants to elaborate or share history, or if I got it right or wrong, or please let me know.
Okay. Chris?
Yes, thanks, Marianne. Thanks, Fidel. Yeah, I believe it was up to was the language that was used. So we can do up to 2 million or 2.5 million, I believe is how it was.
Excellent.
Not that it changes anything.
Sure. Yeah. Next slide, please, Jackie. So this is kind of small to see, but what I did there essentially is I took the piece of our debt schedule, right, which is in our FY23 budget, to show how much it would cost us to to bond this $2 billion, right? And essentially, as you can see there, if we bond this $2 million, it would cost us approximately $225,000 per year for 15 years, and we would start paying it in FY24. Okay, so obviously that is front and center. It is the request of town meeting. I did want to present a second option. Next slide, Jackie. And essentially, so I'll try to cover this as high level as possible, right? So the Water Enterprise Fund is set up as an enterprise fund to say that the fund shall cover all of its expenses, right? So essentially, what happens is when you're setting the rate, you've got a cost, right? And an estimated amount of water you're selling, and you divide one by the other, and you get a rate, right? It's that simple. I mean, it's not complicated. So when Bob presented the budget to select board, he recommended subsidizing the budget with reserves, and he recommended using $750,000. So essentially, with no further changes, the water rate for FY23 would be $12.45 per 100 cubic feet, right? So option 2, which is what I would like to present to the board, is essentially lowering our cost for FY23 and FY24 by $1 million in each year, right? So if we do that, essentially we are lowering our the amount of money that we have to raise by the rate, and it results in a smaller rate increases. So the water rate per 100 cubic feet would be 10.97. Essentially what we are invoiced is the combined rate, right? So water and sewer is combined. So if we do this approach, if we follow this option, it would result in FY23 at least with a 0.1 increase in the combined rate. Next slide, please, Jackie. So I wanted to we love pie charts, I heard in this meeting, so I wanted to throw my own pie chart and just show essentially how the water enterprise budget is broken up, right? So as you can see, the majority of the costs that we can influence are small, right? So the majority of the costs in the water enterprise budget is the MWRA assessment, which we can't negotiate. We cannot negotiate, and our debt cost, which is something that is planned out and it's part of our budget, and essentially we can't negotiate either. We cannot negotiate either. Next slide, Jackie. So what I'm offering essentially is every year we have capital projects that are funded inside the levy, if you will. So they're funded inside of the operating budget. A big one that we keep talking about, and I'm sure we've all heard about, is Walker's Brook, right? So Walker's Brook has had 2 sets of repairs and one more repair that is needed to kind of finish it off. Obviously, it's our industrial corridor. We can't really afford to have any downtime in this corridor, so it is work that we are going to do anyways. The Emerson water main repair is work that was programmed and actually was originally scheduled to be completed in FY22, and because of Walker's Brook was kicked off, right? And I'll say that these kind of projects, in my opinion, won't really be attractive for a grant because they're reactive repairs, right? I mean, when we go for grants, we go for grants that you know are changing the landscape of an area, right? Or are improving the infrastructure of an area. These kind of repairs are essentially, it's broken and we gotta fix it. It's not really negotiable. And then the other piece that Sharon checked with our auditors to make sure that it was possible is we are still paying, you know, $600,000 a year roughly for our buy-in fee into the MWRA. Luckily, that will fall off the books in FY27/FY28. But I think if you know if we can throw some money into the subsidizing of that fee, it would be incredibly helpful. Next slide, please. And finally, so this is a preview. This will take a lot of socializing, a lot of discussions, but having this little wiggle room in the rates will enable us to really have this conversation. So in reviewing the MWRA communities, and there's roughly about 61 communities, there's only a handful of communities that still have only one rate for all payers, right? So what most communities have gone to is a progressive rate structure or a tiered rate structure. So in Wakefield, it just wrapped up. The tier structures were implemented in FY22, and essentially what you do, right, is you incentivize conservation, and you try to provide a benefit for tier ones, and as you can see on the presentation, it is people who are living alone, seniors, and other small users. So what you are doing is as you go up in usage, your fee will essentially go up. This will take a lot of analysis, and actually in our town meeting warrant, we included a request to fund a water rate study similar to what Wakefield has completed, you know, and really try to take a step-by-step approach in this process. Next slide, Jackie. This is really only to emphasize that you know, should Reading invest in water and sewer? I think this chart, you know, summarizes it all. This is the water and sewer cost in all 61 of the MWRA communities. We are the fourth highest, I think, out of 61. And it's not to you know to put blame or any of that. It's more to say that a really good investment is to stretch out these costs. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone on the board have questions? Mark?
Yeah, I guess 4 comments if I could. One, just to clarify on the town meeting article that was passed. The debt authorized is $2 million, and the article only allows us to go up to $2 million. But I think to Chris's point, it's not really relevant. Number 2, I think it's great to kind of see some of these ideas, and that we could consider. And obviously, they're kind of guideposts, if you will, because we could look at things, some of this and some of that as options also. The third is, I think what would be helpful when we come back to this, especially when you look at option 2 and the water enterprise budget, is to also look at the reserves and what the status is of the reserves. Because I think what happened with the Walkersbrook problem is that we ended up hitting more than we anticipated on the reserves. So the reserves are actually lower than we'd like. And it may make sense to look at kind of buffering those a little bit, getting them back to where they were, because we have old pipes. And then fourth point is, and I know we've talked about this also, there could be potentially other funding sources for some of these that we probably should think about also. I know that some of the federal earmark money, I think, might be an option, maybe some state money also, particularly related to the shovel-ready projects. So maybe we should just kind of see where we are on those also, and I guess, I don't know if we can assess where we are and our chances of getting them. That's probably not possible, but those could make a difference. Those could be a few $100,000 or several $100,000 in impact, which would have that would be a big deal here. And sorry, fifth one, last one I wrote here. I know that the MWRA was talking to other communities about joining, and sometimes they're offering them better deals, frankly, than we got. And I know one of the things that we're going to want to do is to make sure that whatever the best deal is the deal that we have too. I know when it was going out to North Reading and they were talking about adding another water line and it was going to inconvenience our residents, that was a really big deal. But as they're looking at other communities, I think we want to talk to MWRA and see what, if anything, can be done to help.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay. Does anyone else have a comment? Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, Fidel, just two really quick questions. The $600K for the MWRA buy-in, that's locked in? Like, even if we paid it all up now, it would still be $600K through 2027? Or is it like, did we borrow money for that, or is it operating?
So when we bought in 2007, there was a $10 million fee essentially, and some of it was a fee, and another one was infrastructure that had to be built. So in 2007, we went out for a 20-year bond essentially, and that bond it expires in 2027. So what is remaining is our debt on that bond.
Okay, but we couldn't, we can't like call on that bond now or anything, right? We're still kind of locked in, aren't we? Or
I am not a finance guy. I know Ed Ross is, but my understanding is that it's debt that is owed. I mean, and could we restructure it or stretch it out? I mean, I'll ask the question,
yeah.
but I'll ask the question, but.
All right. And then just like the restructuring, like the tiers, right? That sounds really interesting, but what's the delta? Like, how much would that cost, like in the first year, or like what is it really just reallocating? I was trying to follow that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is. Again, as I said, the rates are made up of the cost, right? So the cost is not going to change, right? How it changes is how the cost is broken up in each tier,
Okay.
right? So
But there isn't like any ARPA funding to implement it, or is
no.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. So it's not. Okay. Got it. Okay.
No, it's a budgeting tool, if you will. It's not a funding request.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Did anyone else go ahead, Tom?
Jackie, can we throw the slides back up? I don't think we have them here in the room. So, Fidel, I think I heard you say that the $2 million that we're debt servicing for the water tower is going to cost us $225,000 a year for 15 years.
Yes, sir.
Which, with my quick calculator math, brings us to 3.375 over a 15-year period. So it's costing us 1.375 million to service that debt versus paying for it now.
So I will take a look at that. So it's debt and principal, and all I did is essentially take what's in our budget, right, and our debt schedule, and stretch it out. That number sounds high.
It does.
It does sound.
Is it
sounds
only
very
over
high.
that time frame?
Well, I mean, if it's a 15-year bond, that's why I'm asking the question. I mean, I had thought we basically financed that at almost zero.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a big difference
1
between
point
almost
something.
zero.
1.1. Yeah. I'll take a look at that. I mean, I know that when we went out to borrow last time, obviously it's going to be higher now, but it was very low. It was very low.
And we do have to refinance that because we could only borrow short term for a year while select board was deciding what to do with the $2 million, right?
That's correct.
So whatever we had for that year is not going to be what we have for the 15 years,
Absolutely.
and it's
It's
gonna
gonna go
it's going to be higher.
It's gonna be higher.
Right.
It's gonna go up for sure.
Okay, so there's a built-in potential 15-year savings there if we think about it
Absolutely.
that way.
Absolutely.
You know, is one way to think about it. And can you, if we go back to the slide that had the two options for how to use the enterprise fund and the 1 million, how does this 1 million here correlate to the projects you put out there? Right? Is this part of the debt servicing and the pie chart? How does this correlate to the pie chart and the projects you put out there?
Yeah. So if you go to the pie chart, Jackie, there's always capital, right? In the budget, right? In the operating budget. In FY23, it is $550,000. We are adding a request to town meeting to revise the FY22 budget for another $400,000. So the new FY22 budget is going to be roughly $800,000, right? So the because we are going to need to do Walker's Brook this summer. In the slide that shows, next slide, Jackie. So in capital projects that are funded in the operating budget, if you take a sum of that, it's roughly $1.7 million, right? And it's water main repairs, Walker's Brook, Emerson, and maintenance items that are in the capital funding. So it's roughly $1.7 million out of the $2 million. And what I'm proposing is essentially the remainder to subsidize the MWRA buy-in fee.
Okay, across those 2 years
Across the
potentially.
2 years, exactly.
Okay. So that's money we have to spend anyway.
That is money
If
that's
we
coming
don't-
out of our pockets.
If we don't do this via the ARPA, we're going to have to do it via either operating costs or debt servicing for those as well. Right, so it's not really a true, or will we pay this directly out of free cash potentially, or?
Yeah, I mean, these projects are too small to bond, right? So that's why they're included essentially in our operating budget, right? So it's it's things that we absorb every year.
Okay.
So I guess.
But if we use the 2 million to pay the water tower and avoid the 1.3, then these we still have to pay for some way,
yes.
right? So it's not really a true savings in that regard. We're going to have to, we'll use reserves a lot faster.
Sure.
From another way to look at it.
Right.
And might get in trouble as a result of it. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything? Okay, Chris.
Excuse me, Mary Ann?
Yeah.
I was gonna say Ed had a question, but Chris needs to go.
Okay. Well, Chris, real quick, then Ed, and then I'll go after. Go ahead.
Thanks, Marion. So it's starting to seem like instead of 2 million for the water stuff, it's almost like 4 million is like really needed to make any impact on this. Is that how it's shaking out? Because it seems like we can't do any of these projects that should be done now, because if the things break tomorrow, they're going to cost triple the price to have them fixed then.
I think if you're offering me $4 million, I'll be very happy.
Well, yeah, it just seems as if now we're just spending all the money on water, unfortunately. I guess for me, seeing the minus 1.7% increase sounds great. I'd like to see it be a 0% increase, because no one's going to really notice the 1.7. But on subsequent years, if we can minus the 1.7 from the increase that they're getting, then that would be something significant.
Yeah. I mean, Jackie, if you can go to the tables, right? I mean, go back, Jackie. I'm sorry. To the one that says option 2. So one forward. Sorry, Jackie. There you go. So this is it's a spreadsheet, right? I mean, if we want to fund, if we want to fund 1 million to the water tank and then 1 to the budget, right? I mean, essentially you're playing with the numbers at that point, right? So to your earlier point, if it's up to a certain dollar amount for the tank, right, and the rest is to subsidize projects that are in the budget, all of those options are on the table. I'm showing both extremes, if you will.
So what would we have to do? So where it's the option 2 for the 2 million, and if we used $1 million in ARPA, the rate increase would only be the minus 1.7 that's here. Does any of that money in this scenario go to the water tower or not?
In this scenario, in the option 2 that I'm presenting, no, it does not.
So then, additionally, if we don't do the up to 2.5 million for the water tower, we're going to spend another 1.375 million over the course of 15 years.
If that number's right.
Yeah, that seems high.
Yeah.
It does.
It does seem high. It does seem high.
I guess my only other thing is I do like the tiered kind of billing structure. I'll check myself and see where I fit into Wakefield's thing with my, water meter app thing that I have, just to see, where I stand. But I mean, for me, that kind of makes sense, that, if people are conserving or they're home alone, fixed incomes, etc., all of these scenarios just scream, why am I paying the same as everybody else? When I'm, just living alone as opposed to someone else with a swimming pool and sprinklers and that kind of thing. So I do like the tiered approach. Not that it has any effect on ARPA at this point, but I like that you include it in here.
Yeah, the reason why I included in there is that it's going to be much easier to implement on a year where the increase is 0, right? As opposed to a year where the increase is high naturally, because then the increase that's going to be required for the higher tiers is going to be more.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to see the data on that and see what it shakes out on a typical user, and perhaps it goes down by 10%, perhaps it doesn't. So
We'll see.
Yep, thank you.
Before I get to Ed, can I just follow up real quickly with what you were talking about with the tiered rate? So the tiered idea was not an alternative to trying to reduce the rate for a couple of years. It was to try to go along with it.
So the tier rates is a way to bill, if you will, right? I mean, so by implementing tiers, we won't it will not result in lower costs. The costs are the same.
I mean, that's really a select board matter. It's not our matter anyway, which is kind of where I wanted to steer the discussion.
Exactly.
But I guess it's a factor to take into account about, okay, well, if we're trying to allocate money to reduce rates, if we don't do it, there's this other mechanism, even if it could be in a tough rate increase year, that the select board may or may not be able to use. And I guess just before I get to Ed, I had the one thing I wanted to comment on what Mark was saying. The ideas of looking for grants and other things are nice, but I don't know how everything fits in with our ARPA timing. We're trying to do something now. I don't know how long it takes to apply for things, and I guess it's just maybe a factor we weigh in our recommendations to the select board to say, well, we are not going to recommend money because there's these other sources you may or may not get. But I think probably I'm aligning with the way Tom thought. We have to look at what's going to save us the most money. Okay, so Ed,
Before
Jackie,
you go there, can I call the school committee to order?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No problem. Just calling the school committee to order at 7:33. We have 4 members on the call now.
Okay, I missed that when you pointed. I was not looking.
No problem.
So Ed, Ross had a question. Said Jackie.
Thanks, Marianne. I was just going to mention that I probably default to Sharon on the question of the debt servicing. I do think on Tom's back in the envelope calculation, you needed to take out the principal. So I think you might be kind of double counting that, either that's certain Fidel's numbers or whatever. But I think that was inflated. You're probably looking at probably closer to half of that number when you're thinking about what the interest rates are projected to be.
Okay, so Mark, you had a quick follow-up?
Just one more comment, just as it relates to the discussion on debt. If we pay for the debt on one thing, let's say the water tower, and then go and borrow for something else, it's a wash. It's not like we saved any money. If we were planning to do the borrowing anyway, we're still going to spend it. And to the extent that we're talking about some of these projects, if you can go to the other slide on kind of the planned projects for Walkersbrook and things, those are in the budget now. Those are in the operating budget. So those are planned anyway to take place. So, you know, they've got to happen. So I think what we're talking about is kind of which pocket is going to pay for which things more than anything else. It's not that there's some big savings to come, other than potentially specific to the water area. But when we borrow money, we pay for it. There's a rate that we pay for it. If we need the money, we're going to borrow the money. It's not a big savings. I don't want people thinking that, wow, the only thing to do is to pay the $2 million for the water tower because we're going to save all this interest. We're going to take it away from other capital projects essentially, and then we're going to have to borrow for those. So we're not going to. I don't think that's a fair savings.
Except he said the capital projects we're talking about are too small to bond.
They're too small to bond, but how are we going to pay for them? We're still going to be borrowing money.
Their operating budget. You just said it yourself, right?
No, because so inside the operating activities, we still have capital and debt going on. It's not just the stuff that's outside of the limit, it's stuff inside as well. So we'd have to figure out where we borrow larger and use it for different things, or where we borrow the funds. But at the end of the day, we're still going to be borrowing funds to the town. It's which projects they get borrowed for.
Just to build on that, Mark, I think it's an interesting point to think through as we go through it. I mean, in these particular cases, it might be that you're going to have debt for the water tower, but you're not going to necessarily have debt for these smaller projects because you can't bond them. But I think where you're going is there might be other projects that then you're going to have to incur debt for that you couldn't use ARPA money for. And to that, I have to think, what are our priorities, right? If we're not going to do something just because we couldn't afford it otherwise, is ARPA the right thing to spend the money on? Maybe not. I mean, it kind of depends. And that's where we have to go through with the community feedback and others and say, is this really what we want to spend our money on? And that kind of goes into some of our future conversations, right? But I wouldn't say that we're definitely going to go do debt for something if we wouldn't otherwise be doing that. And I think we just have to be careful of just saying that is absolutely something we're going to borrow debt for, right?
Right. I think that the larger projects that are still inside the operating budget, those we need to figure out how to do those still. And we end up not having the money at the right time. We end up trying to borrow sometimes. But I'm largely with your point. I think those are the decisions that we want to talk through and see what the priorities are.
Go ahead, Jeff.
All right, my impression was that the MWRA has certain amounts of money that you can borrow at very low interest rates for particular projects. So I'd be interested to know whether the water tower or any of the other improvements fit under that. I mean, if it's 0%, I mean, I think I heard
It is.
really low,
Yeah, it is.
like
It is.
0%.
So the MWRA does borrowing in phases, essentially by fiscal year. We are close to maxed out, but the next available phase will be a $1 million option, and with the MWRA, the interest rate is 0% over 10 years. That would require that we go to town meeting to get authorization to borrow from the WRA, and with the timeline of this project, it would make it really hard.
Okay.
So it would be better if something else came up, some other
Yeah,
unexpected
in the future.
water main or like some other.
Yeah.
So is the bottom line, what's the bottom line number that you think you would request for water and sewer on this? Is it 2.2 million? Am I adding up the 1.7 plus the 600K a year? Is that what you're coming to?
Absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely.
so we all know.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, you want to follow up?
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, just to follow up with what you mentioned, Fidel, about the million each year. I think that for me, it should be going on the warrant every single year to take the million. If it's free,
Yeah.
if we're not paying on it, I think this is just
Yeah.
something that every single year should be $1 million. We're taking it, we're paying for XYZ and moving on.
Because we have 1 million in
Because
water
we can-
projects every year?
Every
Yeah,
single
that's a good
year,
idea.
like just take the $1 million every single year. So
Agree.
Other communities that are doing that,
Yeah,
Fidel?
absolutely. I mean,
Something we
I think
could be doing?
it's a timing issue too. Sometimes Ryan, who's been who has been our town engineer for a long time and is very qualified. He might stagger it, right? I mean, if you got a $2 million project, then you wait it, right, and you bundle it and you execute it. But we are 100% with confidence. I can say that we are leveraging the MWRA funding.
Perfect. Thanks.
So,
Can you hear me?
yep,
Sharon has her hand raised.
yep, sure. I was gonna ask if any more questions. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to chime in on a couple of the questions about the borrowing. It does look like the numbers that Fidel presented for the borrowing, how much it would cost is more relevant for a 10-year borrowing, not a 15. So I think it may be that Bob might have had it on there as a 15, but it's really a 10. That's my guess. Sorry, my kids just turned the TV on. And then also, there was another question about the MWRA buy-in. We did refinance that. Both of those borrowings had been refinanced prior. I do not think you can call them at this point. I can double check on that. So I believe they're due to be paid off. One of them is ending in fiscal 27. The other one is ending in fiscal 28. So those are definitely going to fall off, and that will help us down the road. Maybe not right away, but I wanted to at least clarify that as those were things that were asked.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone else have anything on this? I guess no public questions because we just have the reporter on this one. All right, thank you, Fidel. I guess we're ready to move on to the next agenda item, which is Reading Public Schools. Are you ready to go, Dr. Milashevsky? Great, thank you.
Right here.
No, I was gonna.
Preferably an open one.
I was, yeah, okay, thank you. I was gonna say, just like pull a chair up to this, but. It's sent to all of us, right? We just have it? We all didn't get that.
No.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you. I'd just like to start, too, as we frame this conversation, I'd like to thank the community, thank this committee for having the schools at the table for these conversations. I think that every town and community has approached this a little bit differently, and I'm not surprised that Reading has, the way that Reading believes and invests in education, that is prioritized having schools here as part of the conversation and an integral part of this discussion. So I'd like to thank this committee here and also thank the select board in advance for continuing to support schools and also recognizing some of the, we think what are urgent needs and a lot of the urgent needs tied to the pandemic that are facing the schools. So Jack, you can go to the next slide. So we're going to, I just have 3 slides tonight. We're going to talk on these in a high level. These are bucketed the same way that we presented our budget earlier this year. You'll see priority area 1, improving academic outcomes. Priority area 2 will focus on the social and emotional needs of students, and then priority 3 will focus on streamlining systems to be more efficient as a district. So starting with priority area 1, tonight we're going to talk through what we think are things that are challenges that have existed within our district that we think also have been amplified as a result of the pandemic. We're going to speak in high level tonight. We're not going to get into sort of the costs of each yet, and I'll speak to sort of the rationale behind that why. So Jack, you can click to the first piece. So for those who are here, good luck reading the small bullets. I'll try to walk you through. Our commitment to improving academic outcomes, we think at the forefront of this work and the cornerstone of this work for us right now is improving early literacy outcomes. We think that we had work as a district to do in terms of improving early literacy outcomes for our students, and we think that this work has just, again, come to the forefront given where our students are in terms of the pandemic. We see students with significant gaps in their learning, and we see students' literacy outcomes all over the place right now, especially in early literacy. I don't think with this group right now I need to dive into sort of the importance of students leaving elementary school reading on grade level, both in terms of future opportunity as people and also in their educational work. So this is work that we take really seriously, that we think is at the cornerstone of an effective sort of educational programming. So in terms of some specifics around early literacy, we're going to speak about this in more detail at our April 14th school committee meeting, but I'll give a high-level overview now. We have been using, we feel, a curriculum tool that is insufficient for our kids, right? We feel that the tool that we are using is not aligned to what research says about how the brain learns how to read, and also aligned to what best practice in the field. And we feel that, and this is also not just my opinion, this is sort of what research and best practice is saying in the field right now. We believe, and we've already worked with our staff on this, we need to make a transition, and making this transition is urgent for us. We need to now more than ever give our teachers the best quality curriculum materials, and we need to make sure that our students have access to the best curriculum materials. The time is now for us to make this shift. We're fortunate that we just received a $200,000 grant from DESE, which is going to allow us to invest in new high-quality literacy curriculum materials, which is a major win for our community and for our district. Now, with that grant is the Accelerating Learning Grant, Literacy Grant. It has a timeline of that we need to use the $200,000 by the end of June. So for those of you who are familiar with just curriculum rollouts in education, that's not a ton of time, right? But at the same time, we feel that this opportunity is far too great for us to pass up the $200,000, and it's also aligned to work that we are going to do and are on the path of doing anyways. And you all know that we can't move forward with a new literacy curriculum without also investing in the appropriate supports for our teachers. If we roll out a curriculum without high quality PD and supports, it's not really going to hold in the way that we know it can. So that's what you see up here. Is you see we're planning to move forward with a $200,000 grant, which could purchase about 3 grade levels of curriculum. We're working with our teachers to figure out sort of what 3 grade levels will move forward next year. Obviously, there would still be grade levels that we didn't get to purchase materials within that $200,000 that we would need to purchase for. We're not going to roll out all of our grade levels next year, but this is an urgent need for us over the next couple of years to make sure all of our grade levels are aligned. Now, the urgent need for us now is in concert with this $200,000, we need to make sure that all of our staff are grounded in foundational professional development about why we're making the shift, along brain research, science of reading, best practice in literacy. You see the curriculum tool professional development. We need to make sure that all of our teachers know how to use the curriculum tool effectively if we're planning to maximize its impact on students. We need to train our staff. Hopefully, we're planning for job embedded training where our staff receiving coaching and feedback on sort of within their day-to-day job around the new tool. And then we're working with our staff now to identify what else would they need to be able to move forward to effectively use a new curriculum, particularly doing that on a shorter timeline than how we would normally roll this out. This is our primary focus right now because you see the timelines are urgent, right? We are purchasing new curriculum by June 30th. We also need to make sure we have the right supports in place. This will drive for us what a lot of the other needs we have. Depending on what curriculum we choose, that we will have a better idea of what the cost will be. Depending on sort of what package of professional development, what sort of how we approach, looking at training possibilities, that will dictate sort of what the whole cost of this package would be. But again, we see this opportunity through ARPA to work in conjunction with this priority. And I think that this is one of the, if not the biggest issue facing our schools right now, and a major opportunity in front of us to make this pivot quickly and effectively. Shift the next bullet is around extending literacy, accelerating student learning. A lot of the research around pandemic-related recovery has been to one of the best strategies you can do is to accelerate learning for students. For those of you following the schools know that we've just launched a before and after school tutoring program in all of our schools to try to close the gap for some of our students and push our students forward. We're trying to invest more in summer programming to create more access for our students during those down times of school. And this year we launched vacation academies, again, a couple of weeks of structured learning during kids' vacation times to try to close gaps. We feel that if we can continue the investments in these types of targeted supports for students during these breaks, we're going to get big bang for our buck and being able to make sure that all of our students are on track. And again, you can't allow our students to continue to fall further and behind as a result of interruptions in learning. And then the last one, checking click one more on improving academic outcomes. This one is one we're working on, but we think it might take a little bit more time, but we've talked about it a few times. We are actively working with our high school community to try to figure out ways to offer more innovative pathways at the high school. As those of you know, we have just started to try to launch a computer science program. So we have a couple of courses now. We have a Intro to Computer Science, Java, C++ course, and AP Computer Science. We think that's just the beginning of a more robust pathway. We're also looking at exploring other ways to get hands-on opportunities for our students and other pathways at the high school level. We are not nearly as far along in that work right now as we are in the early literacy work, but we did want to elevate that to the community because we know that that is something that we are, over the next few years, going to make sure that we have in place. Shifting, this is our big bucket, but shifting to the other two priority areas. Second area, you can click the next one too, Jackie. Support student social and emotional needs. We have this year outlined many times just the intense social and emotional needs that we're seeing for students. So we are considering, in addition to the, just the staffing that we have, do we need to contract out for more supports for students? We don't quite know what the fall will look like yet with student needs, but we anticipate that all the intensity of student needs, especially social and emotionally, is not going to all of a sudden drop down. And also, we eventually need to reinvest in a Tier 1 literacy social and emotional curriculum to support all of our students, as our current Tier 1 social and emotional curriculum is no longer being published. We also have a high school curriculum that's falling off, sort of off the ESSER grant, we know in short order too. And we think that that's something that's been effective for our students. And then lastly, priority area 3, enhancing adult practices. We know that if we build a strong, efficient, coherent system of practice as adults, that will impact our students. One, we believe we need to continue to invest in our teachers in terms of building out their content understanding, and also particularly instructional practices in light of where we are in student needs and pandemic needs. The landscape of education has changed, and we need to continue to invest in our teachers to grow their practice. And then the last bullet here you'll see is streamlining systems. We have a student information system which we feel like right now doesn't meet our needs, that we feel like we need to allow us to be more efficient as a district. School schedules, there's a lot of conversation about how do we maximize time, looking at the elementary half day, looking at time on learning in certain content areas of the middle school, and making sure that high school, that students have access to be able to take the courses that they want throughout their day. So these are all of the things that we felt fit under the context of ARPA, particularly because they may have been gaps that have existed over time, but have particularly been impacted through the pandemic. And then in terms of why we went high level tonight, we went high level because that first bullet around, early literacy, that work is sort of is happening now and is going to be picking up over the next couple of months prior to June 30th. And we feel like we really need to make sure we do that well and support our teachers effectively in that bucket. And that sort of is, I think, going to set the stage. There's an urgency and a special urgency, I think, around that first piece right there too. So again, thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to present tonight, share some of the needs of our schools, and look forward to the conversation and questions.
Any other questions? I have questions, but Chris, go ahead.
No, you can go first, Mariette.
One of the things that I asked this before and it jumps out at me is you got into time sensitivity and you talked about your curriculum purchase, and it sounds like to go along with that, you really need, whether you get money from the select board saying to have some ARPA money or not, to pay for professional development. When is the deadline that you need to know? Are you do you have the money to get this professional development if ARPA doesn't fund it?
We are really hoping that ARPA will be able to support us with this. We're not expecting to get the $200,000 grant when we were notified in late February. If we had known, we would have potentially built in more in our operating budget. I believe at this point we don't really have many other options.
Other than like town meeting emergency free cash or something. Like
but I think, and Tom, will let you jump into on this too. I feel that this $200,000 is such an opportunity for our district. A process that normally would have taken longer, we feel, was really something that pushed us, increased the urgency, because we did not want to leave $200,000 on the table for something that we inevitably were going to go in that direction anyway. So I think that's something I was hoping to talk through tonight, was just how can we, all the other needs aside, push for us that literacy piece up to the front, so that the next couple of months, that is something that could be on the forefront for select board to discuss.
I mean, it's something that I feel like if you said, we need $400K for training, and we all could approve that, and then I'm just walking through a hypothetical scenario. Then the select board could get it locked and loaded by May. Like, is that a time frame? Is that the kind of time frame you're looking for this small emergency piece?
That is a perfect timeline, and I think sort of the one that would need to work for us. The other things on there, I think, are urgent for us, but not a couple of months urgency. The literacy piece is really bound by the next couple of months.
Right.
So
Otherwise, we're not. If we don't do it, you're scrambling to make use of this grant, and you're not making the best use of this grant.
Correct.
The other time sensitive part, and then I'll let someone else. I have more questions, but I'll let someone ask. I watched your meeting last week with Sarah Hardy talking about getting certain subgroups up to speed, and possibly, I don't know whether they're going to be involved in vacation academies, tutoring and or summer programs. But do you have funding for those now, or are those also time sensitive?
Great question. So we have used this year sort of savings, projected end of year savings to fund both tutoring and vacation academy. So we have not mapped out for next year. Sort of, we would probably approach that the same way we have this year. And Susan, if you want anything you want to share on that too, through end of year savings. But at this point, we haven't built into our budget sort of a spot for either tutoring or vacation academy.
So is this summer covered?
This summer, yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
you don't need an approval for us now to cover
No,
this
we
summer.
we again, I think we could, with some additional funding, build out summer programming more. But I think we're in an okay place for being able to move summer programming forward. And I want to go back to something that you said too about sort of certain groups in our district that maybe haven't had as much success in the past. At the meeting, Sarah Hardy talked a little bit about our students of color, our EL students, and she didn't name, but also is on the forefront for us, our students with disabilities. We feel like that equity work is built into like those two pieces. I think a huge part of equity work is making sure that all of our students have access to a really high quality tier 1 literacy curriculum. Right? If we don't, right, we're exacerbating gaps. I think something that we've talked about with our staff is it's the research around the current program that we're using shares that our current program is particularly insufficient for our ELs, our students with disabilities, and also names our economically disadvantaged students. So we think that's a major piece of equity work. The other piece of equity work we feel like is, yes, we have opened up vacation academies to all students. We have really tried to recruit students who we feel like haven't had as much success in our district traditionally. For example, we've been working with our EL coordinator to try to make sure that as many of our English learners can be in during vacation academy to extend their time on learning. Because we know that for many of our ELs, learning remotely was especially hard. You know, learning with masks was especially difficult, right? So trying to make sure that when we are extending these opportunities, we are extending them to students too that we know will benefit sort of and need it the most.
Okay, the last thing I just mentioned is I know you, when you're under the category of extending and accelerating student learning, it just sounded like the innovative pathways, actually this isn't the last thing, that seems like that would require staffing, so that seems like a tough thing for ARPA to go. But the last thing you threw in there about the streamlining systems and new scheduler and replacing Rediker, is that also like a nice contained purchase with an amount that ARPA can say, yes, here's $50K for a new one or something like that?
It is. We've talked, we don't know if we're quite ready for this year to move forward. I think we have some staff who are very eager to say, yes, let's do it right now. But yes, it's a one-time sort of the upfront cost that I think it would take. But Susan, I don't know if you think, is that accurate to think that we're probably looking more towards a longer process to look at a couple of different options, work with our staff, see which is the right one, maybe starting more school year, 24.
Okay.
Is that what you think?
We researched during 23 and roll out in 24. That was possible, and if it wasn't, it will be a discrete project.
So, if there's any ARPA money left. Okay, I'm done. I'm sure the rest of the group has questions. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Marion. And thanks, Tom. I don't know if I've shared my email to your predecessor before, but I sent John Doherty an email in January of 2021 mentioning about kids not knowing how to read and they were going to be staying back, etc. Perhaps he should focus on that. And here you are today exactly telling us that, there's something that we can do to correct reading for all students at Reading. So I really appreciate you bringing that to the forefront. So my questions on that, the 200K per grade level, that is it 200K per grade level or per 3?
Total, and we anticipate getting some quotes that it should last about 3 grade levels.
Okay. And is that budgeted already into your future, like budgets and whatnot?
No.
So it's not in there currently. And is there a detriment to implementing all of this all at once? Like, is there I don't know, like, is it?
Great question. So we'll dive into more detail on the 14th, but I'll give you the high level overview here. So we met with all of our staff elementary teachers on both Thursday and Friday to talk to them face to face about the shift that we're planning on making and why. And you had staff who said, yeah, we need to make sure we have the best materials in place for our kids. And we had some grade levels who said, we're sort of feel ready. We feel this is aligned to what our beliefs are about effective literacy instruction. So they were sort of ready and volunteering themselves and their colleagues. Now, we have assembled a literacy leadership team comprised of educators at all the different schools, all the different grade levels, to help us determine which curriculum are we going to use, what supports do we need to make it work effectively, and then lastly, which grade levels does it make sense to move forward with. I think a K-5 or a K-8 rollout would be really difficult to pull off, just given sort of we're still in the midst of a math curriculum rollout and all the other needs for students. We are targeting between 1 to 3 grade levels to start. I'm going to defer to sort of the teachers to say, is it 1, is it 2, is it 3? I would say initially it seems like teachers are thinking that at least 2 or 2 grade levels seems to be a good spot to start, whether that's K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, some combination. We're working through that. There is an argument to be made to say, let's go all in, all now. I just think that would be too much in terms of change, and we want to be able to do it well.
So you're only asking for the 200 grand then? Or that's what you're getting from the grant? Like, what are you,
Correct.
which way are you going?
So yeah, we're getting the 200 in the grant, and I think what we hope to do over the next couple of weeks is go back and figure out which curriculum is it that we want to purchase and how much is that, right? Also, what would then the future costs be for us in terms of all the other grade levels? What supports do we need in place immediately to make sure that we can do this well? So if our teachers say they need, consultants to come in to be able to help, provide some coaching and tutoring. If they need some, consultants to come in to provide additional gap closing for some of our students who are struggling. I'm really interested in what the teachers have to say to feel like what they need. So that will help us once we know what they feel like they need and what we think they need to roll this out effectively. We can put a number on it. But at this point, it's still probably 2-3 weeks away for us being able to do that. I would love the opportunity to come back to this committee to be able to share, now that we know which curriculum we chose, how much it costs, what we think PD is going to look like, here's what the full package would be, and to be able to be more transparent with that. But again, we're probably a couple weeks out from that.
And it's all grade levels that would need the new program, so
Yeah.
kindergarten is included as
Kindergarten's
well?
included, correct.
Okay.
Yep,
Pre-K.
there's
Pre-K, right?
pre-K, yeah, even pre-K, correct. And there's a lot of curriculums that go up through 8th grade, and there's some that go through 5, right? We as a team have to start to think through what's best for our district.
So as of today, you wouldn't feel confident saying, here's all 12 at once, go ahead?
No.
That's usually
I don't think the
reading in
teachers
grade
have
12, we hope.
And I want to say too that I just want to give an acknowledgement to the teachers that it's a lot to implement a new curriculum when the elementary teachers are also in the midst of a new math curriculum rollout in the midst of the pandemic context. But I think from what we saw from our teachers, and we had conversations with teachers like you, they're eager to make sure they have access to the best curriculum materials, and they're excited at the impact that will have on students. But it's a lot, and we want to be mindful that if we roll it out with 2 grade levels, we can also look lessons learned and take the time to be able to prep the other grade levels over the next year. I think that's probably a better process for us. But I appreciate the urgency and the push.
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like that's a loaded question because I know the answer, but as we look at this, are we going to come back in 2 or 3 weeks and say, this isn't just this year's request, but we would ask for this much next year, this much the year after that. This is a discrete spend, but it is not a 1-year spend.
Correct.
Right? So to Chris's point, if we go through, let's just say K through 8 for the sake of argument, that's 9 grades, right? You could do 3, 3, 3, you could do whatever, but the implementation, including the training, including, the on-prem coaching, et cetera, to build up the practice, which you can then roll off after that 3-year period. Right, because the teachers have that practice, they're comfortable with it, they know the tools, but this is a discrete spend, not a continuous permanent spend.
Correct.
And the plan that we would present, or you and Susan would present, would include that 3-4 year spend that would fit into the ARPA timelines.
Correct. So, and if Tom says it's a loaded question and he thinks he knows the answer, I better not answer it incorrectly. He is correct. And I think our plan is to be able to map out for a couple of years exactly what the costs would be.
Dr. Milashevsky, I just wanted to tell you our next couple of meetings so you understand the time frame. We have a meeting coming on April 12th. Then we also have one May 11th and May 24th. So if you were ready to, April 12th is only a couple of weeks away, but by May 11th, which becomes after town meeting, I think that starts getting into that May thing, and I'd have to look at a select board schedule, because all we can do is recommend.
Correct.
Then select board has to take action. So just so you can keep those dates in mind, and they'll be posted.
Was select board was the 17th?
Select board is the 19th, and then May 3rd.
Or I mean, in terms
April
of names,
19th, you
May
said? April?
May
7th.
I thought it was May 17th was the May one.
Marion, I think by it's unlikely
and then May 17th.
May 17th. I think it's unlikely by April 12th
Right,
that
that's
we're
what I
able
was
to
saying,
have.
May 11th.
So where we are in the process right now is our teachers, our literacy leadership team are starting to get some of the materials in their hands, starting to pilot a lesson or a unit. We're going to go out to some districts that are rolling out or in the, already, selected these curriculums. By May 11th, I think we would have a really good understanding of where we're going and be able to put some cost to certain items.
Yeah, because I think that's all we need really is a bottom line number
Okay. We can,
with anyone else.
if we can commit to the 11th.
Yeah, I'll make sure that we note the agenda. So I'm sure other people may have comments or questions. Jackie, is there anyone in the audience? No?
No hands currently on Zoom.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Nowashevsky.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you for your time.
So we'll come back.
Oh,
We'll come back
Mark, did
again
you
on the
have
11th with more details.
Okay.
All set.
Okay. So, the next item in order on the agenda, and I would refer the audience and the board to our packet, was, part of some sort of homework that Fidel assigned up to all of us individually, which was to, put suggestions in on a list of items, and I'm not sure how we're gonna go through this, that maybe we can start seeing if we need additional buckets or categories. And I mean, I can just start this. I wasn't sure how this was going to go. I just kind of wrote things in a memo format, and I tried to put in things that I know other people weren't listing, that people were emailing me and calling me and asking me to. Hence the cemetery garage, but that was also mentioned that there's a DPW garage issue, so that kind of stuff. Someone called me about funding a community activity like the street fair. Parents spoke to me about writing needs in the high school. I looked also, like that, I'm just telling you where my stuff comes from. I'd like to ask each of you as well. A parent messaged me that the middle schools found IXL helpful. With the schools, when they talked about the writing, actually this is a good thing to mention to Dr. Milashevsky while he's here. I looked at your, is it accurate to say a teaching fellows are $20K a year?
So I'll come back up.
Yes.
That is accurate, yes.
Okay.
And also, we love the idea that you had that in there as a potential strategy. So that was really encouraging that we saw you put
Well,
it
I mean, several people have messaged me, and I also have 2 high schoolers, so I know losing a couple of years in the pandemic from middle to high school in writing. So I thought, well, if you've got these fellows running the tutoring things and fellows and other things, and they're like one contracted things, they're not a permanent staff expense. It could be something that could be tried out, but I know the schools clearly had a whole bunch of other, very important priorities, but we were just listing categories.
Thank you for sharing that.
So, and then the end of what I had here was just stuff, Chris and Mark will remember from the select board meeting. This isn't school stuff now. When the former town manager had a list for you, and I highlighted some items. I said, well, these look kind of like discrete purchases, unfunded things, and these would maybe be on the town side or community priorities. So that's kind of where my things came from, and maybe we can go along the group, whoever start at one end or the other. I'll start with Jeff. He's quiet down there. You can just explain your priorities, and if you had ideas about where they would fit in on buckets or whether we need a category. So I think your stuff is like.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't gotten a lot of input from people emailing me. Certainly the Watertown main work we've seen already. The school vacation academy, it sounds like we're covered with that.
Yeah.
But then progress on the Birch Meadow master plan. I mean, I bumped my head a couple times on Imagination Station woodwork there, right, when my kids were little, and that's been gone for I don't know how many years.
It was here when
right?
I moved here. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
gone.
so getting moving on that is I think something we keep seeing the master plan and redoing it. So I'd like to see some actual progress there.
Okay.
Marianne,
Yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Ed has a comment.
Okay, Ed.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Marianne. I need a motion to adjourn FinCom from someone in the room.
Move to adjourn the Finance Committee.
Second.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Thanks, Marianne. So we're adjourned at 8:10. Thanks, Jackie. Sorry about that, Marianne.
That's okay.
You need a vote?
I guess is
He
everybody
left already,
here?
so
What? He's already gone.
he left
No,
already.
I'm still, I do need a vote, sorry.
All in favor?
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Marianne,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
and yes, 4-0.
I think it was Jackie too. No?
Thanks for being a stickler, Sean. Thanks.
Okay, good night. So Jeff, do you
Yeah,
feel like
sure.
any of this fits into Fidel's original buckets? If we try to think about a master list of things that one's the schools, one's water sewer, one is recreation or capital. I
Yeah, so
guess.
certainly the Birch Meadow fits into recreation.
Yeah.
Right? So
Andrew, I didn't see you, but did you have any additions?
The one thing that I haven't sort of seen on any of the list so far was one that was mentioned in that one letter to the editor in the newspaper about pay for frontline workers.
For essential workers?
Yep. I think that would maybe go in the community priorities.
Yep. And Tom, you had some suggestions here.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dr. Milcheski covered the education ones already. Fidel's covered the water and sewer ones already. I would echo what Dr. Coram said with regards to Birch Meadow. I would really like to see something happen there. It's been way too long. Whether it's lighting, whether it's, the path in the bathroom, whatever the first step is. And I think we have that added to the packet as well that shows kind of where that is. I did add a few other things in there from a recreation perspective that maybe aren't being thought of. A while ago, there was a plan put together for Sturgis Park that required the resurfacing and redoing of the tennis courts and the basketball courts at Sturgis, which are frankly kind of atrocious as they are right now, versus say Wash Park or other areas. So that might be a small spend on a relative basis that might improve that park. And then this is kind of more of a pipe dream to a degree, but the Zanny land that's over by Burbank that we bought a couple of years ago with town meeting money, I'd love to see that conditioned or switched into more field space, whether it's baseball or soccer or others. We always are pressed for field space when it comes to the athletic seasons and the challenges we face there. Between lacrosse, soccer, baseball, we're always competing with each other and we're always stepping on each other, and there's just not enough space. So that area is also close to, conservation land, so I don't know that we could build much more than field space there. But I'd be curious to see what, is possible in that space. Maybe a small study or something to see what's possible at least, because it's been there for 2 or 3 years without any action at all. So that's one. The other one.
Sorry, that one is going to be on the agenda for the select board meeting on April 19th. And we've looked at a few things and I'll present a few options to the select board on the 19th.
Great. I'll tune in for that one. The other one in terms of the community priorities, and I kind of kept it to the buckets we had before. I would, I think the outdoor dining stuff that we did, last year with COVID, was a good first step despite some missteps in the process. I'd love to see more in that space. We can be the anti-North End and allow outdoor dining with, no cost and whatnot. Bring more restaurants in from the North End, and we can serve them somehow.
Didn't the town have bistro tables? So that was something like you could.
They
get more
did,
bistro
but
tables.
considering the lighting that people talked about putting at the end of Haven, if the old CVS becomes a restaurant and there's seating out there at the end of Haven or something, I don't know. There's no restaurant there now, but if we were to have more outdoor dining, I think that was a good COVID thing that would be great to see more of. And then the other kind of pipe dream I had in there, and Fidel, you and I kind of jokingly talked about it once before, is that old RMLD building. If we can convert that into something, You know, planning had a pretty nice design for that whole like V vector portion of the town. And if that becomes something, I just put brewery because that's kind of a near and dear to my heart. But if it was a brewery, I think that would draw people. And there's a lot of space there that you could have outdoor type concepts as well. You know, that would build on the community overall as well. So again, that's pipe dream, but that's an idea. Might be low cost and might be a public-private conversation as well.
Okay. And I know there's town people that have suggestions too, but I'll move on to Mark.
Thanks, Mary Ann. So I tried to do a couple of things. One is to kind of generate a new list, and then I also tried to plug it in to see how it fit into buckets. And they're a little bit different in some ways. I created buckets where things fit pretty nicely. One was called pandemic impact, and there was a category for schools, for seniors, and for those with modest means. And I guess what I chime in is that the whole community was very impacted by COVID, and I think it is worthwhile thinking about how we can mitigate some of those impacts to the different groups. I think that there are a lot of things on the senior side that we should be thinking about. One related to a study for the next level of senior center or senior facilities, and also more related to programs and other activities that we haven't been able to do and we can't do. So I wanted to put those onto the discussion list. Also, folks of more modest means in general, just thinking about food pantry and other things. There are a lot of stories now that the food pantries in general are getting harmed essentially by inflation that's going on and food costs and things. And there's still many people for whom this is really important, and I think we ought to think about that as one of the things on the priority list. Then I moved to what I called community space, and a lot of it included some of the activities like Birch Meadow Complex that we're talking about. If we were to work on a new senior or multi-generational center, it might be a really interesting use of a substantial amount of money, or a more substantial amount of money, to dig into that. And actually, I kind of did this kind of this bucketed list, but I also talked about it kind of in the prior pages about what those things could be. I don't have answers as to what the exact numbers should be or why or how, but for now I wanted to kind of just get them into the discussion. I also thought that some of the things like a farmer's market would be pretty interesting to talk about, a location study, things like that. Tom, what you were talking about in terms of the building, the brewery, I've heard axe throwing, which I definitely want to keep out of the downtown. But that whole Eastern Gateway area, I think, is an opportunity for us to look at. And initially, I think the plans involved where DPW was possibly going to move to Camp Curtis Guild. So it was a pretty grand scale as a result of that. I'm not sure if we've looked at it on a smaller scale, like just the RMLD property and the area around that. But I think there's great opportunity there that we should explore. I then created two categories of what I called community smaller projects and community bigger projects, for lack of a better term. I think it'd be great for us to have some small wins that come out of the ARPA money. I know Bob at one point called it some fun stuff, but I think it'd be great to have some small wins in arts, music, green space, smaller projects. And, you know, I just threw a number of $200,000 as kind of a way of thinking about that. Things that we could just absolutely point to that we get done that are different, and they're smaller things that we may not have been able to do otherwise. So that's one. And then I think there might be some bigger ones also, which I think are more the community priority list kinds of questions. I didn't bother to list all of those, but just the notion that we'd have some chunk of funds for that. We talked about infrastructure. I'd like to look at infrastructure a slightly different way also. I'll challenge Fidel on this one. Certainly the rates are an issue. I think the reserves got hit courtesy of the problems we had at Walkersbrook. And it may be that we should look at replenishing the reserves a little bit. And then also talking about potentially a project beyond that. Another thing that's come up, and I've heard this from a number of constituents, is sidewalks and trees. There are a lot of areas where we've talked about sidewalks that we can't. I know those are larger projects, but trees, shady space would be really nice to think about. Those aren't really otherwise budgeted, so I thought those should be on here. From a capital point of view, we talked about the water tank. What we haven't talked about are things that are not on the capital plan with numbers. Things like upgrades to the bleachers, the field house floor, areas like that. Those are capital projects that aren't, they need to happen, but they're not on the plan yet. And we need to think about what those are. It might even be an electric vehicle pilot program for the town, getting a couple of vehicles I think would fit into capital also. Just two other things. One, community development. Our affordable housing structure isn't a structure. It's not effective. We have money that just kind of sits there. It's a very small amount of money. I know that there are some plans, but I think to put more money into that kitty would actually allow us to do something. Some of it could be senior affordable housing, could be veterans affordable housing, could be general affordable housing. I think we need to take a look at that. That may be a bigger bite than we can take at the moment, but I think it's something that we should consider. And last but not least, however we go through this, I think it makes sense to think about leaving some reserves in the pandemic fund, if you will. Something is likely to happen, because remember, our friend Murphy was an optimist. There may be other needs that come up, and I'm not suggesting we leave a large amount of money, but a modest amount in case we need to do some activity. So that's kind of how I structured my thoughts. Sorry for the long discussion, but I thought it would help. And that's how I thought about buckets too. I kind of looked at the list of ideas and then I said, well, where do they fit? And some of them were clearly, there's pandemic mitigation straight up to certain communities. Others are more space or capital oriented.
It really sounds like all of us are, there's a lot of subdividing in the community areas that we're starting to build up the community priorities with even different subcategories, and I think that's where it's going.
Yep.
With that. Okay, Chris?
Thanks, Marion. So yeah, I had roughly about 2 million for water sewer, depending on Fidel's presentation, which now it might be 4 million, it might be 1.6, floating all over the place. The other idea I had for the schools before Tom's presentation was solar for RMHS and other properties, if feasible, to offset full-day kindergarten to an extent. So this way here, you're semi-funding full-day kindergarten with ARPA money and continuing it going forward by taking the electric rates off the schools that they would have to be paying because now they have solar instead. Seems like a long-winded way of money laundering, essentially. I'm not suggesting Bitcoin mining machines, which would be incredible for this.
Why aren't you suggesting that?
I mean, so there's two people out there who are like, this guy's a genius, and then everyone else says he's crazy. So for Tom's priorities, that's why he's the expert. I'm not. I would definitely see about funding if we have a literacy issue as serious as he's making it out to be, and this is going to affect all students in Reading. I definitely would kind of pivot to that to a point. I also had on here a community dog park on town-owned land, which seems super inexpensive. All I ever see is people complaining about dog stuff each and every single day. It's dogs, this, yet we don't have a dog park. And how much really can that cost to make a dog park? I mean, it doesn't seem like much. I'm not a dog park builder person, but it seems like it's just earth and like a fence. But so just something like that. This way here, someone can, the dog community can have somewhere to go, because it just seems as if that's all I ever see is dogs and kids. To Jeff's point, I had on here Imagination Station back in Reading. I had dinner with some friends this past weekend, and that specifically came up was, remember when Imagination Station was back in Reading. Now, I wasn't here at the time, but seeing the photos and everything online and just having somewhere for the kids to go, it's a nice token that what comes out of the pandemic is something like this, that they can just go there. It's outside. Everything's going to be nice and new. It's not metal, it's wood. So hopefully it's still fairly inexpensive at this point. But just something to get kids actively involved and going back out again. Funds to add a first floor bathroom to the existing senior or to relocate programs to another location. So essentially, the first floor bathroom thing has been beaten to death. There needs to be something on the senior center. If not, they have to go somewhere else, because you can't just sustain the way that it is, go up to the next floor, etc. So however that much it ends up being, I think it's feasible for us to see about adding something like that that's nominal compared to a new senior center or doing something else. Or perhaps relocating programs to another location. So over where, I don't know, the Walgreens thing has been beaten to death. That seems as if something could be used there. Or over at where Stop and Shop is and all that, Liquor Junction, that property over there. Maybe just moving programs to there, or supplementing what the senior center has. Maybe a lease or something like that. Something that's not, long term, just something to perhaps fund us to keep us subsided till we get one. But it's more of we have to get the input from the community to see if they're willing to just fund a new senior center, a multi-generational center, etc. Reading Disney World with the dog park that is currently here instead. So I did have on here, Andrew, the back pay for essential workers. I just would like to see our figure with what we're working with in total between the schools, the police, fire, EMS, etc. Are we talking, is it 500K, 2 million, 1.7, just something rough beyond me just throwing out numbers right now. And then some portion of the funds to address the mental health crisis. I know we added a new position to the town, but as we can see from all the police presentations and everything, the way that mental health has been scaling just these past 2 years, it's just, I don't see how it just isn't burst at the seams beyond what it already is. So whatever we can contribute to that, whether it's programs, I'm not a specialist in this area, so I'd just like to hear from somebody that would be able to address what we would need, because I don't know what it is, but I'd like to find out. So that's what I got from my spending.
Thank you. And Joe?
Yeah, besides like what's been mentioned already, like the only couple of things I had probably were, well, definitely vote for like pub, Imagination Station. I remember watching Imagination Station, being constructed. I just moved to Reading, and it was a community project, and I'm going like, this is a really cool town we just moved into, right? And my kids have benefited from that area for years, right? I agree, like that would be a way to bring the community back together too, rather than just watch their sibling play a sport, right? That actually, the younger kids would actually have something to do, right? So, a couple of things I was just thinking of that, like I haven't heard anyone talk about, would be like more around substance abuse. I was trying to tie it to the pandemic, and thinking, okay, could some money be spent there, right? I know there's opportunities for grants, but just thinking about where you might want to channel that, whether it's to the schools or through the town directly. Another thing is, it may be a crazy idea, but making Reading bike friendly, okay? And I know for people that bike or don't bike, it's, there's a lot of towns, like, and if you pay $4.30 for like a gallon, right? I think there's more people might want to bike, locally, right? And it's crazy that it's very hard to, bike within Reading, right? There's other towns, Cambridge, Somerville, that can do it, right? I don't know why Reading can't do it, and I don't think it's like big money, right? And people can just, slow down a little, right? And the other thing I was thinking about the town forest, right? So that, speaking of Bill Sullivan about that, and thinking like of opportunities there. And at the last town meeting, I really thought there was like a lot of like community interest and like the parking around Reading, buying the 5 lots. And I know there was a big price tag, like $2.5 million, and the town meeting wasn't behind that, but the town meeting did approve buying 1 lot, okay? And I think there's a lot more that could be done with that 1 lot. For anyone that's familiar with the town forest or uses it now, there's a lot more interest in the town forest. On a good day, it's hard to find a parking space on Grove Street. If you want to go through, Wood End, you really can't do that on the weekends if there's any sports activity going on, right? So I really think it would make it more of a showcase to do something with that lot 5. It might be hopefully shot money to make it more accessible. I think you can get like 16, 18 cars in there. I think that's what was estimated by the DPW. And then also use money to finish off. We have a big problem with like the red pines, right? So I'm not a forestry expert, but they're all going to be gone, right? So those trees, if and I'm familiar from my Boy Scout days, those were planted 90 years ago, right? So it takes a while for those trees to grow, and the sooner we get to them, like the better. And it's not just, cutting down those trees in multiple phases, because you only can really cut them probably in the February, March timeframe. But it's also, you want to replant something, right? So, and right now, for the parts where, trees were removed, it's a bit of an eyesore in places, right? So I really think it's an opportunity. People discovered the town forest. If we want people to go there and, grow its use, or who knows, if there is somewhat of a dog park there, right? Maybe you can make more of the existing dog park, So again, I was just trying to think of things that I hadn't seen brought up yet, so, and people are talking about.
Can I just check to see if Sean Brandt, who's online, he has anything before I go back to people? Sean, I know you didn't have anything here, but did you have anything to add, just so everyone gets their turn?
Dr. Milichewski has my proxy on the schools pieces, but maybe I'll just upvote a couple of things that I heard. I agree with everyone who included Birch Meadow on the list. I think, making progress there makes a ton of sense. I think Chris's suggestion of the dog park is a really interesting one for us to think about and pursue. It was a Facebook blow up that I saw just the other day around, dogs pooping in the fields as we're starting spring sports. So I think that's a really good one to sort of raise to the top of the list as well. But other than that, Dr. Milichewski has my proxy on the schools piece.
Okay, thank you. And Mark, you had a follow-up?
Just, I wanted to boost Joe on town forest, but also Fidel and I exchanged a glance. There's actually a lot of activity, a lot of discussion taking place in terms of access to the forest and use of that lot. Even over the next few weeks, there'll be some discussions with Meadowbrook about that, and then plans are being made for discussions about what to do exactly with that. But I want to boost what you were saying, but let you know there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and the point on that too is I think the sense of urgency is as that land on Grove Street gets developed too, right? So we want to really have a plan and be ahead of it, right? So.
Okay, I know that I'm gonna get to the town thing, and just one follow-up on the dog park, just to warn you, like Wakefield has a dog park, and you'd want to talk about people going online complaining about things. They have all the online complaints about dogs attacking each other at the dog park, so you could be creating your own, creating a new problem.
You can call it the Chris Haley Dog Park, so they know who to blame.
So, okay. So I saw on here, and I don't know if Sharon wants to speak. I see suggestions from Sharon Angstrom and Victor Centeniello on behalf of the town. I don't know whether Fidel wants to speak to him or Sharon does. It's in the packet around page 7.
Yep. I'll be more than happy to speak on it unless Sharon wants to.
I can certainly talk to it.
Thank you, Sharon.
So I was talking to our assessor, and we were just talking about, he works for Wakefield as well, kind of some of what he's seen in Wakefield, and just how would we reach out to people who are really struggling, maybe financially, people of more modest means. We did do with the CARES grant a rental and mortgage assistance program. It was just for 1 month around Christmas time, and I was surprised how many people were in need. And also we had issues regarding unemployment fraud. So some people had been laid off from their job, and then they went and applied for unemployment and had to wait to get unemployment because there was a fraudulent case open in their name. So things like that was very hard for me to see happening to people, like, to have, everything closed down and people falling behind on mortgage and rent because they couldn't even get unemployment. So I wanted to make sure that we don't miss those people who, because of inflation, are maybe in a rough spot. Some of our fixed income people of modest means, that we're thinking about rental assistance, maybe mortgage assistance, because they did have a moratorium, but I just worry, how do people get caught up and they get too far behind? Also, I think Victor had mentioned some employee recognition is something that he saw in Wakefield. Small business assistance for businesses that might be struggling to recover from the financial impact of having a bad couple of years with the pandemic. So there domestic abuse and substance abuse and mental health services are things that he saw over there in Wakefield. We also talked about it wouldn't be a hard stretch to look at people who qualify for free or reduced lunch and try to provide some relief to those families that definitely fall in that, that income range where we'd be targeting. So we were just trying to think about not missing some of that real struggle that could still exist. I hope it doesn't still exist, but knowing what I saw when we did the CARES grant, I wanted to make sure that we at least looked at it.
Okay, so I think we've gone through all of the ideas. We're almost right on schedule, so I'm not sure what we're gonna do with this big list, but it probably leads right into our next agenda item, which is criteria. for now we've heard all these ideas, and what are the approaches we're going to take, whether decide, do we present every single one of them to the community, do we think about what are rank them by cost and bucket. I guess the criteria discussion is kind of open, and I don't know, Fidel, if you have any ideas from when you've seen other communities. I've seen like select boards kind of just choose things, but then I've also seen places where they look at a standard when somebody's like applying for a grant to justify getting ARPA money. Can this be spent in the time frame, shovel ready? Is this benefiting a big swath of the community, a narrow swath? Did you have any ideas before I threw it to the board about good criteria for us to consider?
I think it's all over the place. I think what so what Chelsea did is essentially the group created sub buckets, I'll say, and the survey was to rank those buckets in order of priorities, and essentially those that were ranked the highest, were thought to be more desirable for the community. So yeah, I'm not sure that's helpful.
Okay, so it was kind of like let the community not really impose our own working group subcommittees standards, but kind of give the community the option of ranking the sub buckets and then asking that. We'll get into that in our survey stuff.
With the caveat that not everything was put on. The recommendations from the staff, I think, were held back, if you will. It was more those items that were more of a community benefit, if you will. Yeah.
Okay. So does anyone want to start? I feel like this is a tough topic, and maybe it's gonna fizzle, but I don't know how we're gonna decide whether we're just gonna list everything, and then so we have everything, we have our results. How do we narrow down a deliverable to the select board, is I guess where this is going. Once we get results, what are we gonna look at? Is it gonna be majority support based on what we've heard from Fidel and Dr. Milashevsky? Because the community may want different things than our town and school leadership has suggested. And I guess what do we do in that case?
Sorry, I do want to add that on our next meeting on April 12th, the Recreation Committee and Activitas, who is a contractor that's actively working on Birch Meadow, and our director of recreation, will come to the meeting and essentially do a similar presentation to what the superintendent and I did.
Okay, yeah, so we have more inputs to consider. Okay. Go ahead, Mark. Chris.
So thanks, Rand. I think that so a lot of things that we can think about. You mentioned some really good ones too, in terms of reach, need, and impact. Thinking about which things should fit into which area, but maybe start higher just for a second. I think this group was formed because it represents the major bodies dealing with financial matters in terms of elected appointed boards, and I think that we're here to talk about things we know, things we worked on, as well as get some community input. So I don't think the intention was ever to kind of say, we'll just give a list and majority rules from the community and that's the end of it. We don't have the resources to reach out in a way like that, which would basically be an election. So I don't think that was really the intent. I think the goal would be to kind of say, hey, where do we see the priorities? What are we getting for community input? I know Wakefield, as an example, kind of solicited, what ideas would you like to see on the list? And I think we've done some of that, but can do some more. Yep. See where people are rating a few things. And then I think it's kind of going through the list and saying, hey, if we just take you know, some of the biggest items, I think we could do 3 things and have spent $7.5 million, and maybe say to ourselves, maybe we didn't do exactly what we wanted here. So I don't think we're going to be able to necessarily 100% fund many things. I see it as being a lot of compromises, but maybe finding out based on what we hear back, based on what we talk about as a group, making some suggestions, saying these seem to fit as the items we'd like to find a way to do some funding of, maybe even hear some recommendations for the dollar amounts for what they are. I think the notion of need and impact is important. Reach into the community is important. This idea of small versus large, I think, is really important also. I think we need to leave room for small. I think otherwise the money's gonna be, you know, just finished. There are a few things, a handful, maybe 2 handfuls of things that for modest amounts of money we can really accomplish and have a big benefit for the community. I would hate to see those get flushed to the bottom in this process. So maybe that's just kind of thinking structurally.
Right, and then early on, I don't want to forget too, we had like the time sensitivity for this school,
Sorry,
because that
yeah.
probably, time sensitivity would seem like it would supersede other things if it's, you know, immediate time sensitive, but the schools may not be the only thing. But those are good thoughts. Chris?
Thanks, Marion. Yeah, I think that in seeing, once again, Fidel's spending bucket ratio kind of thing, it seems as if things are kind of falling into place for all of those. I don't think Dr. Milachevsky's asking for over 2 million. I don't think Fidel's asking for over 2 million. He'd want 4, 8, whatever he could get. But
It's over 2.
yeah, and then the 1.5 million for athletics and 1.75 community priorities. So the water and sewer affects everybody in town. So maximum community consensus, you're not going to get more than 100% unless there's a random person not using water in Reading. I don't know who they are. They'll come to the dog park apparently. So for me, that just seems like that is something that is just, how can anyone not want the 2 million spent on the water and sewer to offset the water rates, and that affects everybody? To me, that's just how I see it. Like, why would anyone be like, no, we shouldn't do that, we'll do something else? So it's more of that it's falling into these buckets where we can perhaps put out the survey or something based off the 1.75 or 1.25, whatever scenario we come down, whittled down to, where the community can have input. Perhaps it's not a dog park, it's some other unique idea that everyone says, oh yeah, this kind of thing. And that's 300K or something kind of small. It's more of, I'm fine with getting the community input, but I think a lot of these items are, water and sewer affects everybody. Schools, not so much, but you know, a majority of people come to Reading because of the schools. So it's kind of, all of these things are falling into place. I think that, you know, obviously reaching out to the community, seeing what they want, and perhaps there's something else that we're missing in here, because a lot of our ideas are kind of aligning with, you know what it is, it's Birch Meadow is being repeated, water is just obviously beaten to death. It's just these, we're seeming to get there with the sponge and whatnot of what it is. To think that we're going to have to go outside that for something else doesn't seem like that would be the case, but you know, I'm open to hearing feedback on it. But it seems as if we're kind of in this realm where these things are just making somewhat sense to go with.
Okay. Go ahead, Tom.
Just to build on that and, you know, trying to think about it a little bit, I think when we talked about this last week, there was the, you know, the urgency was part of it. There was the one time, right? We don't want recurring spend. So that's, I think we're pretty much all unanimously on board with that regard. But I also want to be careful that we don't run into the death by 1,000 cuts. That's why one of the reasons why I like the bucket concept and keeping the buckets the way they are. I think we should generally be thinking about things that are, for lack of a better way to say it, shovel ready is one of the words you used before, Marianne, as well. That is not something that's going to fund something to study something else to then finally come back 5 years from now with something that we're going to have to figure out how to fund otherwise. I'm actually very worried about that we would frankly be wasting the money in cases like that. I want to be very careful that we're thinking about discrete deliverables that can come out and I think there's a lot of community priorities that can come out with discrete deliverables that this is going to be done. And it's not going to lead to something else that's another longer term spend of some sort as well. I think the other thing we talked about in the past that needs to go in this criteria is there a savings of some sort that we would anticipate coming from this? You know, water and sewer fits into that perfectly. It hits everybody's pockets, right? It's going to be a savings from the individual perspective, and it also saves the town from a spend perspective over that period of time. Reading is one that hits in that pocket pretty well. Dr. Milczewski didn't say it, but we've said it in the past. You know, if we get the reading right at the elementary level, we're going to spend less sending kids out of district. We're going to spend less from a tutoring and remediation perspective in 6, 8, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? So how do we address it from that perspective as well as part of this criteria? Not everything we do is going to yield savings. That's where those small one-hit, you know, quick wins could come into play. But I think the majority of this money needs to be thought about how are we going to yield savings for people from the town perspective and for the individual that's coming out of it as a result of some of this. That's where this has to be very strategic in the way we deploy it. And that might be, there's 3 or 4 big things. And then maybe 5 or 10 discrete small things of 50, 100,000 or whatever. But those 3 or 4 big things really need to hit the mark big time from a
There's
savings
an elegance in
perspective.
that simplicity of not having, you know, a list as long as what's in our packet to present to the select board, because they don't want to see.
It has to be doable, right? Whatever we're presenting has to be feasible and doable in the period of time we're talking about as well. We have to be very careful
So
about the
feasible
pie in
and
the sky.
doable are probably two criterias: feasible, doable, ready, high benefit, you know, and visible.
Not everything's visible. Water's not visible. It's visible in your bill when you see the bill come, and it's a little bit lower or not increased necessarily, but we have to be careful about that too.
I guess we've also said one-time things only. The sooner you spend it, the better, for sure. I mean, I think with the pandemic, hopefully, there's no way around winding down. I think people need some good news now. If we sort of say we're going to build Imagination Station 4 years from now, and we're past the pandemic, I think that's not a great use of the money. The one thing I would caution on some of the water things, stuff like that, savings are great, but this is a one-shot thing, and the water really needs to run itself. I know our rates are high, but like if we just use this to repair water mains on Walker's Brook Drive, yeah, it saves us money down. I'd rather see it, if, you know, I know it's $1 million is $1 million, but call it the water tower so it's something big. But just, I hate the idea of taking this one-shot pot of, you know, extra money. We're going to repair something that broke 50 years ago. I mean, like, that's not a great bang for the buck. I know it's one pocket versus the other. It's all the same, but optically, I'd much rather build a new water tower than repair a water main. And then, you know, savings are all good, but I think getting some real positive benefit. I mean, savings kind of happen over time. I'd love to see some things that are more sort of visible and today. And not that we can't do things that save money, but things like the dog park or, you know, outdoor recreation stuff, the fields over by the hockey rink. If we can do some sort of one-hit projects like that that really are a game changer. I think the curriculum is great for the schools, stuff like that. But yeah, I think savings are nice, but I'd love to see this have more sort of immediate, visible impact.
I mean, it sounds like we could have it all. We can have a little bit of everything. I was writing it down and thinking like the Chinese menu approach. Okay,
Yeah.
Some fun stuff, some boring stuff, some school stuff. No. And I'm not saying water and sewer are boring, but they're not as exciting, but they're necessary. So that there's ways to look at it. Anyone else or anyone on Zoom? Okay, Jeff and Joe.
Go ahead, Jim.
Right. So I like something about the table that Mark put in his thing that kind of broke it out into the buckets. I'd like to see maybe, you know, go through all of the suggestions from all of us and collate that into, you know, maybe go back to the original 4 buckets that were in Fidel's instead of Mark's, which kind of has a little bit of different flavor to it in terms of how the buckets are labeled. But go back to those original 4 buckets and kind of put everything in it, and then maybe have some kind of a checklist that says, you know, this has an immediate impact, or, you know, this is a fun thing, this is a, you know, a boring, invisible thing, you know. But break it into those, bring the information from all of us into one table that's kind of broken up by the buckets, so that
So
we can
that's
kind of see, okay,
something
we have a
I
huge
could
number of
do.
things in this bucket, but they're all small, or or they, they overwhelm the initial plan we had for that bucket. Just so, looking at paging through the packet today, it's a little hard to see, how these would all add up into the different
Right,
buckets.
but I think that's something I could do by the next meeting, at least with what we've seen, try to have that. I don't know that I want to leave it only up to my subjective judgment about immediate. I'd have to go look at this meeting
So
again
certainly,
and see.
I would say, let's break it into the buckets, and then let's have some kind of check boxes that we would fill in at the next meeting to say, yeah,
'Cause it
Cross
sound-
tab.
yeah, it sounds like we're getting criteria, so it can be ready for all of us to kind of go through together,
Sure,
maybe.
yeah.
Okay,
You got
and
Sean?
Joe?
Yeah, yeah, it was just to build on that. I was thinking in my own head too, just a simple matrix where it lists all the projects and then going left to right, like different criteria. Just replaying what people said, right? Is it one time? Is it, does it have some type of financial benefit, payback, or is there intrinsic value? We have 900 dogs in Reading. I don't know, the dog type. And then also like other type of criteria that we didn't, like maybe like catch on, like some way to kind of like align it to those like top-down priorities.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll end up redoing this work if we get when we decide on our community thing, like a survey of feedback, whether the same chart will get refined or whether new things will have to be added. But I guess it's worth doing first and then seeing after the survey, how does
It could
this
feed
change?
into the survey,
Yeah.
right? I mean, what both Jeff and Joe are saying could feed into the survey. And by
Yeah.
the way, Sean has his hand raised if you're ready.
Okay.
Or just one last point on that though. I think you could also look at bands on the allocations too. Not whether it's like making up numbers, like top down 20% to 40%, right? And see if there's room to move things, right? Because I guess I'm looking at it by the list of items across different criteria, but also trying to then associate it to like the top down allocation. And then carrying it forward, if you look at what town of Sudbury did, they have a great like survey that they did on an app, right? And I think theirs was like 5.3 million, but they asked folks to validate the allocation. Like that was part of the survey. And
Yeah.
they had great like visuals tied to it, word clouds, everything, so.
I know
how we
we
follow up.
mentioned when we get to our survey, we will also
Yeah,
want something that
sorry.
works on paper. But yeah, that's something to think of. Sean, you had a comment too?
Yeah, thanks, Marianne. A few things. I've heard a few people use the phrase one time. I prefer language like time limited, right? I mean, this is funding that it can be spent over the next several years, and so I think we need to have sort of a clear view of when, for how long. Sorry, I got distracted by my own image there on the Zoom. How long the funding would be needed for a certain thing, but it's not necessarily one time per se. And maybe even we can consider things where there's sort of a viable, well-defined path to transitioning from something that's ARPA supported to something that's not, kind of by the end of that term. So I encourage us to think a little bit more expansively than literally, it's a single payment out the door. Second thing I wanted to say is just from a criteria perspective as well, Andrew, which I agree with, I really want to amplify, which is if we think about sort of the original intent of this funding before we got, that $10 million exemption, it was really intended as recovery from the pandemic. And so I don't think we should be afraid of investing in things that just frankly improve the quality of life for a number of residents or a pocket of residents in town. Things like the senior center bathroom, things like dog parks, that fit into that bucket where it's not going to really save us any money. It doesn't necessarily, prevent us from borrowing later or anything like that, but it does improve the quality of life for people that, have had a difficult couple of years. And then the third thing I wanted to say is, this idea, so it really resonates with me. Several folks have talked about putting money back in people's pockets is one of those things that could be appealing and one of those criteria we could think about. I want to caution us to think deeply about whether buying down the water rates for a short period of time is the right way to do that. That does feel somewhat regressive to me. I think about, I've got a neighbor nearby who's widowed. Her tax valuation, she's on a fixed income. her tax valuation is probably not that different than mine, but I'm sure my water bill is 5 or 6 times higher than hers, right? I've just got 5 people in my house and I water the lawn and all that kind of stuff. So, so there's probably something regressive about buying down water rates. I'd almost rather see us have the select board, drop the tax levy by $1 million for a year or two and put money back in people's pockets that way. That feels like like a better approach, and an even better approach is one like Sharon was suggesting, which is really targeted interventions and support for people that have been sort of demonstrably impacted by the pandemic. So I like the emerging consensus around putting money back in people's pockets. I'm just not sure that buying down water rates, it feels good. We'd all love to see our water bills be a little bit lower, or maybe just not be a little bit higher next time. But I'm not sure it's the most effective and efficient use of those dollars if we're trying to help people who are, recovering or suffering from the pandemic. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. I mean, just to follow up on with the original intent of the pandemic, one of original intent of ARPA. One of the lead things was water and broadband infrastructure, which kind of ties back to what the town manager was proposing. It's separate from supplementing the water rates, but just getting back to all the different fixes. I mean, that goes back to the original intent as well. But there's so many things. So I think this was good that we kind of know the next step from this. So that'll definitely be a topic in the next meeting. Look, we're running just about on time. Does anyone else have anything else to say about this before we move into our other homework? Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Marion. I would only caution with putting dollar figures next to everything now, because the way that things stand, it could be double by the time we're done with this. So, and I'm not sure what the case is for us to be able to procure pipes that are needed for all of these projects. I don't know if Fidel knows, like, what's the lead time? Are we talking before it was 3 weeks and now it's 3 years, or what is the sense that you're getting from this? Because like I had mentioned, if any of these break tomorrow, it's going to be quadruple the price, and the savings based off that is just massive.
I think it really depends what we're talking about. So the water tank, for example, went out to bid in the fall, was awarded in December, and it is 6 months delayed, right? But we put out a sewer project on Haven Street, and we're thinking we're going to break ground in April, because the contractor who was the low bidder had the pipes in stock, right? So I think it really depends. I think for another challenge, what Sean said, we're not lowering water rates on purpose. We are funding capital projects that are funded inside of the budget, right? So it is items that would have been funded by the budget anyways. It is essentially just funding from a different pocket.
So there's no really supply chain shortages that you can see on pipes, or like how I said, Imagination Station. I don't know, like how much is wood like massively delayed? I know the price, skyrocketed, but I'm just wondering, like the supply chain issues. Are we talking where these things are feasible, or we're like 2-3 years out?
I think any supply chain issues are probably a few months out. It's not years. I think that on things that we have been working on in the past, right? I mean, they're in the queue, if you will, right? So if an emergency break happened in Walkersbrook, knock on wood, tomorrow, right? We would get it fixed, right? I mean, water would not be spewing because we can't get the pipe. It's probably more expensive, to your point, but the supply is there.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm not sure how much, like I said, a bathroom adding on to the senior center is. It could be 20 grand, it could be 50 grand, 100 grand. It might not even be possible. So it's hard to put a figure onto things that I proposed to a point, other than, like I said, the dog park just seems, it's a fence, I guess. So I just caution against whatever we put here might not actually be the figure 2 months from now, or even possible. So
Well, our ARPA can be a contribution towards something unless there's no other, funding source for it. I mean, did you have a comment, Mark?
Yeah, I actually want to amplify your point. I think that's spot on. I think that if we look at this as it's 100% or zero on every item, there aren't going to be many items, and I think we're going to miss a lot of things. And we can't necessarily get exact costs on a lot of things. But if we're able to view it as, it may be what we think it is now, and if it's not, it could be a substantial contribution toward it. I think that flexibility is really good. Not that we go to 100 cuts or 1,000 cuts. Sorry, not 1,000 cuts.
Right. We don't want to start anything that we can't finish the imagination station because we don't have any more money for the wood or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But we might come back and say, you know what, we can't do $2.5 million in infrastructure projects, but let's plan on $2 million or something like that. I think that would work, very well. And frankly, it may open up another opportunity.
Right. And that's an area though where there's a backup because we have the operating budget. Some of these other things are, if someone is just depending, okay, we're expecting $25K to, buy dining tables or whatever visible thing.
Yep. And just one last comment, just following on things. I know there's a desire for certainty in terms of what we're doing, but I'm gonna harp on kind of the senior center activities. There is a next step. I can't tell you what it is. We have recalc that hopefully is going to be able to kind of figure things out, but it is going to be needing a next step. And we're not going to put away the money to build the senior center. I get it, but there is a clear next step that's going to have to happen. I think that actually working with Fidel, with Gene, we're actually trying to get an estimate of the cost of what that feasibility study would look like. And I would want us to be open enough to kind of think about that as well, even though it might not have it's exactly X dollars and here it is.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sorry, if I could just say, I mean, a feasibility study is an investment, right? I mean, because a study gives you, a schematics designs. It gives you a cost estimate, right? I mean, with the Killam School, the first step was a feasibility study, right? Because you need some guideposts, if you will, right? So a study is an investment into the next step of the queue, right? I mean, and if that's either grant opportunities or earmarks or whatever, no one is going to really take us seriously until that study is done.
Okay. So I think we're able to move on to the last real substantive item on our agenda other than minutes, which is the survey questions. And I don't know who else did their homework, but I was always someone who got my homework done. So I got my homework done. Jackie, can you pull up my sample survey? So I thought I'd lead it off, and I started off writing questions that my first two questions aren't that great, but I'll show you them. And then I kind of stole some questions from some other communities. So these aren't going to be able to be that easy to be read, but my first couple of questions, yeah, that's really going to be hard to read. I don't even know whether we would want to ask the community about their opinion on, whether ARPA should be only spent on compensating for the pandemic or open to everything. That's where I was starting to think, trying to get the public's view. Those may not even be necessary. But if you start looking where I get into questions 3, 4, and 5, and 3 was my own question, and then 4 and 5 I stole from Melrose. I thought about the idea of ranking. And
Scroll down.
yeah, I'm sorry, scroll down to like where my question 3 is there, which is it's going to be hard to read. Maybe people on Zoom can read. So I started, because I had already had the packet, I started taking items like we all had on the packet. And I realized how many do we want somebody to rank? Other communities sometimes say just rank 5. I listed more than enough. Like I'm listing 15 and saying ranking 10, so leave some out and leave room for other. And this is not an exhaustive list, but this was a kind of a question that I thought of. general categories. Now, if you scroll to question 4, this is what Melrose actually asked, and we could even, click on their survey. And I just tweaked. I think I put traffic parking in there because that was just a Reading issue. Melrose asked people, and I like this question, choose the top 3 issues facing our community today, or add your own issue. And I think that would tell people a lot, because that would tell us just some guidance for our spending, something like that. And most of these topics, again, were Melrose topics, but I threw in traffic parking for us. And question 5 is kind of similar, but Melrose asked 2 different ranking questions. Rank the categories of Reading community needs in order of priority. Yeah, I guess they meant that their boxes had a way to add ranks. I just kind of was doing this within Google Docs. So I didn't really tweak these other than throwing in elder services. But some of these are more categories than we considered here. For example, homelessness prevention services, that may not be as applicable to us. Career services may not be applicable to us. Transportation may be less applicable. But those were the ideas. And then towards the end, again, question 6 maybe. Can you scroll to question 6? I feel like, does everyone else have what I'm looking at, or you guys are trying to read the screen? Because I sent it to my vice chair. So a question 6 question was, please select the type of projects you would like to see funded by Reading in the next 3 years. Check as many as you like. So this is probably maybe the kind of question where we would get a sense of, okay, how many times did people check off new sidewalks? How many times did people check off water, sewer, drainage projects? And maybe nobody ever checked off, youth mental health. And I doubt that would happen. So there may be too many ways of asking the same thing. And then in the end was just kind of a demographic question. Question 7 would be, are you a resident? Are you a business owner? Are you a town employee? Are you a member of a nonprofit? And do we even want to survey anyone other than residents? That's probably a key idea. Because town employees are affected by what we do. Local nonprofits and local businesses are affected by what we do, but I don't know if they should have an equal stake with residents. So this was my start, and my survey is actually longer than Melrose. Maybe after this meeting, Jackie, we could send or people could find the Melrose link, and you could take their survey. It's only 3 questions. So I'd like to throw it out there if anyone else had anything to offer in questions or something. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Marion. I guess I had a couple questions. I'd want to find out what Melrose got for feedback. Did they get like 5,000 people respond?
I think they just opened the survey end of February, beginning of March. Fidel, you had sent me some links, but one of them wasn't working. And so I was looking for like active surveys. I think Wakefield might have had a survey, but I don't know their response.
And do we know where it went out? Like where it was posted? Was it?
I'm going to click
website?
right now on their SurveyMonkey link because it was posted. A community. I got to it from their city website.
Mm-hmm.
Jackie, is it possible for you to click on that link in my in my sample survey at the top, the one where I said look at Melrose, because it brings up the SurveyMonkey link. I don't know. It may not be workable to do that. But that's a live survey.
I guess I'm only asking because when I had the thought of like a survey kind of scenario, I always thought it was like 20, 30 questions, but I do like the simplicity of whittling it down to the 3, 4, 5 kind of questions.
Yeah, so if you zoom in a little on Melrose, and this is just, I can read it, it just says, thank you for taking the Mayor's Melrose Community Needs Survey to help gain input from as many community members as possible. Please share this with your Melrose friends, family members. This survey will help the city collect community feedback around the use of the city's ARPA funds. Your input will help the mayor and his team determine how the city will prioritize use of these financial resources and enable it to best support. And so basically they explain up front, which I like, this survey will ask you to rate a series of community needs by placing them in order of your personal priorities and identify projects of interest to you. So then can you scroll down, because it's going to look a little different than what I tried to copy. So it says choose the top 3 issues in the Melrose community, or add your own issue at the bottom. So say I tried to do this live and I click social services, public safety, education. It's letting me click more than that, but that's a bunch of topics. So someone can you scroll down to the next question, please, Jackie? So this is where, and I guess I'd like feedback from the group, would we want this kind of a ranking question? So this could be replicated on paper by someone filling in a number. You can see if you just click on the first one, like violence prevention, you can just click to show like it's a drop down menu and someone can just rank. So someone might rank more than one thing top, which I like, which they may rank 3 things number 1 and everything else lower. And they have similar.
Won't let you do that.
What?
Won't let you do that.
It won't let you do that? Okay, well, I'll just try. So violence, transportation. It switches it. Okay.
Yep.
So I misspoke.
Which I do think is important, right? You shouldn't be able to have 3 number 1s. You have to make a decision.
Yeah, I'm not sure what tool they use to do this, but it allows you to select different things. And then their third question, if you scroll down just to the third one, and then that's the end of the survey. Maybe this is mobile friendly. And this is the please select as many as you like. So this is just something where I thought of the same thing, that we could tweak this to be Reading specific. I think it's also good feedback for boards just to know whether it's finance committee, select board, here's what our community cares about.
Yeah.
But we would probably, like, based on what we generate out of here, tailor the list to what we think we can, like, not put things on here that we can't do. Obviously, people will answer with the other, for the fantasy things that we can never be able to do. And, like, there's things on here people want, but I think we all try to avoid personnel-based things, like saying more teachers in the high school or full day K for all, and things that we like, but ARPA can't handle. Our ARPA is not built to sustain that kind of thing long term. Now, this didn't have the demographic question that I got from Wakefield. So, and thanks, Jackie. That I don't know if anyone else had any thoughts on the scope of a survey. If we're not asked if you want a long survey.
Sean has his hand raised.
Okay, Sean.
So there's a lot that I like in some of those surveys you shared, Marianne. A couple thoughts. One is, I think I think I can see this being as short as 3 questions. Because one of the questions is really going to ask people to weigh in on many, many things, right? On maybe 10, 15, 20 things. I really liked that question around what do you think are the top 3 issues facing, I don't know if that's Melrose or Wakefield.
Yeah, Melrose.
What are the top 3 issues facing the town right now? That could almost serve as a de facto rating criteria, right? So, we may find that lots of people agree that some issue is important, and then we look at the sort of types of solutions that we put in the survey, and none of them really address those issues that a lot of people think are important, and maybe that helps us sort of think differently about how we populate the list. So I really like that. I think that's a good sort of way to thing to pair with tangible things for people to weigh in on. As far as the tangible things goes, I think we should think deeply about whether or not a rank ordering versus a more of a rating scale, like how important do you think each of these things are, and you go from not at all important to strongly important or very important.
That's a good approach, yeah.
Yeah, there are pros and cons to both, but the rank ordering sometimes gives you a false sense that people don't value things just because they didn't put it at the top of that list, and there might be things that we want to fund that are incredibly important to 10 or 15% of people and are well received by the other 85 or 90% that they wouldn't put at the top of that list. So a rating scale versus a ranking can be helpful there. And then I think the third thing is just that open-ended, I think we talked about last time, that open-ended question around what other issues or what other things, would you like to see funded? I know, obviously we've all got some input from folks, but this survey presumably will hit, hundreds of additional people. And so I think there's value in making sure we ask that open-ended question at the end as well.
Yeah, I mean, my mock survey, we didn't scroll to it, but I had a thing like, okay, 400 characters or less, your thoughts, and there would be some of that. Anyway, Mark, and then
Thank you.
Joe.
So I like a lot of what you said, Sean. I think that keeping it short makes a lot of sense. I think if it's 3 or 4 questions, it's perfect. I would caution us against putting 30 things onto that. I think we're going to have a sense based on our buckets and sort of sub buckets and what we've talked about. That may help us kind of guide in the things that we're thinking about. And people always have the option of other to go outside of that if they think something differently. On the issue of ranking, so ranking is kind of nice just to kind of see where things are, and it prevents everybody from pegging it. I love these 10 and hate these 10. But we're not going to be able to get like a representative survey necessarily in terms of, given our constraints and timing and activities. I think it's more kind of a sense of folks that are filling it out, and it's great and it's really helpful. I think that, if we were betting our life on it, I would do it very differently. I don't think we're going to bet our life on it. But to get that sense, I think would be great in a short survey, and somebody can do it easily. If it can be done online or through iPads and at the library and at the senior center and with that assistance, you can get a tool that'll rank it pretty easily. The other thing that's happening here is it's reordering what it shows first for different people. So it does it randomly. And the beauty of that is it's not building in a bias of, well, we always put such and such first. Everybody's going to answer, they're seeing that one first. You can't do that random thing, unfortunately, in a paper survey without, well, I guess you could. You could make a bunch of copies. It'd be difficult, but in the old days they did it.
Like varying the test.
They could do it.
Well, what percentage of, how many, Chris, you had said how many paper responses did you get for the parking survey? Was it 20 or something?
Yeah, it wasn't that high of a figure. I know we had like 1,500 overall. I don't think there was like some stack of papers and whatnot. But we still have to offer them because, not everybody
can do it.
has a device and whatnot. I think when I saw the numbering up there with the 1 and whatever, like it seemed massively confusing to be able to like, this is going to be 1 now. Where is my number 2? I'll put that like.
Yeah, when there's so many choices.
So I do like the idea of doing highly, not so much.
Like the series
5,
of dots
the
where you
bubbles,
say,
yeah,
yeah.
like the 1 to 5 kind of scenario, because seeing the 1 and all that, you like lost me after going after number 2. It just seemed way too confusing. And then just having the radios, you know what I mean, highly applicable, not applicable, and then the
Well,
one
some
from the
people
middle.
may be neutral. Like
Neutral,
not
yeah,
caring.
that's why you go with the 5. But yeah, I didn't like the numbering thing at all. But I like the way that it's laid out and whatnot. And like I said, I did originally think of parking as obviously, you would like to think that it's not as involved as ARPA, because ARPA could be like really anything at this point, and parking is only downtown-ish area. But yeah, we had like 30 something questions on there. But once again, it only filled front and back of a piece of paper. So you only needed to
And I
worry
don't think
about.
this would be much.
Oh no,
different if
not
we
with the
put
3 or
middle
4. I like it, whittling it down, and then you have the other. And then people can write their 400 characters, and perhaps we get a lot of consensus there.
Yeah. And Joe, you had a comment?
Yeah, just quickly, like back to like the Sudbury's survey. I didn't see how it was input, right? But how they present the results is really powerful. It's all visualization, like, you can really, go through these results quickly. It doesn't seem like they gave the people filling it out like a lot of room, like it's something you could fill really quickly. Like, I wish I had it in front of me.
So you can find the results, but the survey is not live anymore.
I couldn't find it. I don't have my I ran out.
Yeah, no, I'll see if I.
But the other thing I liked about it at the beginning, it kind of asked the people filling it out, like validate like why you think Sudbury is special to you, something like that. And I think that's important to like set up like, okay, for Reading, both for short term and long term, right? Like what I think Sudbury was like 82%, said schools, right? Like things that they valued really highly. And then it went into like how you'd allocate the ARPA funding, and still had the catch-all, like to add additional like items that might not have been reported. So
Yeah.
And even when you're going through the looking at the results again, it's really nice. Like they even have like people familiar with those word clouds. Okay, schools just jump out at you. You know what I mean? So it's really easy to look at a table in graphic format. And the only other 2 cents I'd add too is it's really interesting to compare like Sudbury to Brockton, like just the priorities. I mean, just like socioeconomically, like just to see, there's things we're not even thinking of probably that would appear in Brockton that, you don't see in Sudbury already. And it's just a question like, should we? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think I found it. I don't want to like try to challenge Jackie to go keyword search for flash vote Sudbury.
Yeah,
Because
it's called
then
flash vote, like-
then you'll see results.
Exactly. I don't know
but
if you can, like, I don't know. I'm not trying to sell.
I have a
Sudbury, but,
link. I mean, I can you know, I'll send it to
I mean,
her.
that was the best one I could see. Like,
Could we,
in terms-
maybe just to kind of summarize what we're seeing here quickly, I think I found the same thing. They had 815
This one
people
like
fill it
this?
out.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I was impressed
5
because it's, like
questions.
the number of people that responded, because what's Sudbury like? Is that what 20,000 people guessing, or I don't know.
That's on par with, like I said, the park survey being like 1,500-ish, and we have 27,000 people.
Jackie, I'm
so-
gonna send
okay.
you the link.
Yeah, and it was roughly, I think it was like 530, 520 or something that they had for ARPA funding. So, similar to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's they asked an interesting other question, like, what are the strengths of Sudbury? All right, so, Jackie, I just sent you the link to the Sudbury survey, so maybe that can be, yeah, it's something we can scroll through, and then they even include, I don't know how they ran it, they include unfiltered responses, like, you can
Yeah,
see
just
the
the
free
laundry
responses
list
of
like,
people.
the free, full response. Yeah. So.
So that's it's another approach. Like, it kind of said first question was, what do you think the strengths of Sudbury are? Which aspects are most important to you? So it's kind of getting their mentality, and then it starts getting into ARPA. This ARPA money can only be spent on the following 5 categories. Which are the most important to you? You can choose up to 3. So if you could go to like question 3, maybe, Jackie. Thank you for finding
So
it.
it's not a laundry list like Melrose, right? It's a.
Yeah. So if you
It's
can
a
zoom in
straw
on that, I think that's a good one for us to model and consider. That's their results, but you can see that their question only option had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 5 buckets. Then none of these are not sure, and I'll just read them for those who can't read because I have it up. So you could vote on support public health, address economic impacts, replace lost government revenue, premium pay for essential workers, invest in water, sewer, and broadband. None of these, not sure. And one of the things to keep in mind is this survey was done in October 2021, before the guidance changed. So that's why they were limited to these. These were remember the official allowable ones.
Right.
But even then, there's a nice simplicity in that. You see, well, economic impacts was number 1 with them. Public health, COVID was still raging then.
Yeah, those are our categories, quote unquote,
Right.
right? That you mapped
I mean,
to,
we're in a little bit of a different place and we have more options, but I'd love to be able to see these kinds of results and present them to the community in a forum. In fact, Sudbury, March 24th of this month, they were having a forum. I saw in there. So then, can you scroll down to the next question, Jackie? Question 4. And this is an interesting question because they asked, and it's hard to zoom in. Here's a sample list of projects. How would you allocate
Yeah,
100
got
across
that,
this
yeah.
sample list?
Spend $100.
And so
great.
that's asking the public to give your breakdown. Expand pre-K, $14, $20 roadway, like that kind of stuff. That was the biggest one. So do we like that kind of a question? Like, how would you spend?
I do like that kind of question.
It-
That was
it
one I
helps
thought
it-
of, yeah.
It helps it
Yeah.
come to, like, everyone can think about how would I spend $100.
Yeah.
Yep.
And rather than rank order 30 things, right? You get right to the
Right.
priority.
Okay, and
Yeah, if
then
you want to put $100 in one thing, or if you want to put $1 in everything, right?
Yep.
and then that's really it. Then there's, unfiltered responses. I will be disgusted if the town tries to use these funds for the Fairbanks project, whatever that is. If they clearly feel
I don't know who
strongly.
that outlier was.
Can we find out if they did it though? Is that
So
on an agenda
we can
somewhere?
only imagine what the unfiltered responses would be in Reading.
Well, if I can, Marion, I
Yeah.
just I don't know, I've never seen this flash vote thing before. This seems pretty incredible. I'm sure there's a cost associated with it, but I guess
Let's see what it is.
I'm
And
fine
spend some
with.
ARPA money on the flash vote.
Yes, I mean, it can't
If
be
it
something
saves us-
crazy.
If
But
it
it
saves us
looks,
money.
it looks incredible. I like how it has all these like random comments from people that are on here that you can just see the next 5, and I mean, this
Better
is
than
pretty
Melrose's
incredible.
approach, I guess.
this
more-
is
better than
just-
SurveyMonkey, right?
So yeah, we just
Yeah,
gotta
it's
find
really
out.
interesting too. It says you can get email, text, or voice options to make it work.
So they
So-
can call you and stuff.
So
Yeah.
someone could do it over the phone?
Yeah, I mean, Flashcard's not a survey monkey type tool. I mean, it's a consulting firm that conducts market research essentially. So we certainly could spend money on it, but I mean, that's how they do it. Is their people will literally call, you know, to try and get a representative sample. They'll call particular types of people to make sure they get a representative sample.
And the way at the top, Jack, if you can scroll to the very top, at the start of it, just look at where it says filter results by. I mean, look, you can drop down and filter by age and gender, locals if that's verifiable, which is kind of nice to see how different people prioritize things if they're willing to do it. So I guess it's and then like if I filtered by age and then scroll down, like if you filter by age, Jackie, and then scroll down to the question on dollars, I'm curious what that was. What question was that? 5? How did you spend 4? So that's kind of telling. Like if you look, obviously, people 31 to 45 want to spend a lot of money on education. Like if you scroll down a little bit more, the people 61 plus want to spend on the roads. And that's in Sudbury. But I think that would be very kind of helpful data. You're spoiling us, Joe.
This seems pretty incredible to me. I mean,
Maybe it costs $1 million, but the,
Yeah,
I'm not saying it goes
but
a
it's
million,
so
but-
useful.
submitting
It
an
really
inquiry
gives
for
you the
pricing now.
picture of things.
And it,
Yeah,
It-
good.
it's only useful if the people actually go through all of the survey questions that you need to get this, you know, how many people are actually going to enter the age data and the, you know, the other things that they're filtering
True.
by, which, you know, some people will, but some people will say, I'm not doing the survey because there are too many questions, right? So the beauty of these 3 or 4 question things is people are like, okay, 5 minutes, click, 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 done, right? So, yeah, I mean, it would be great if we could get this information. I want to caution that making it too long makes it less
Well, it
likely
sounds
to
like
get
they
it.
got to this with just maybe a demographic question at the end.
yeah, they
Will
only
you-
had 5 questions on
It was
here.
5, maybe.
I
It'd
don't
be
know what
nice
the-
if we could
I
get out
couldn't
the
see
original.
the filtering as to, but it
Filtering
looked
has
like
to be
there
behind
was
the
a lot
question.
more
There has to be a
filtering.
question or two behind the filtering.
Yeah.
What age, you know, what precinct they're, what, you know, are you a resident,
Yeah.
etc.
We don't need to know precincts at our level.
No,
Yeah.
but this is crazy good. Like it seems almost like bypassing the whole 3 to 5 question thing and getting like 10, but these are like softball beginning ones kind of thing. This just seems very advantageous to be doing this.
I submitted a pricing inquiry.
Okay,
There you go.
well, that's
Can I,
it. So I think, you know, we've kind of hit the end of our time discussing this. Go ahead.
I'm trying,
sorry, go ahead.
trying not to interrupt, but also trying to make sure I get a chance.
Yes, sure.
I you know, going back a little bit before we got to Sudbury, which Joe, thank you for bringing that up. I think there's value in the 1 to 10. I'm just going to respectfully disagree with Chris in terms of that process. There's value in the 1 to 10. There's also value in the bubbles, and I think you can ask the same question with both survey response types and get important information out of that. Right? You can't say everything's highly important and then have all the highly importance be number 12, right? Or 1 to 10, as the case may be. So correlating those two answers really provides a lot of detailed information that can help drive some of this understanding. If it's 1 to 5, if it's 1 to 10, I think we can cull what that is. But as you actually do that, it's once you start doing it, people don't have a hard time filling out that portion of a survey generally. It looks weird when we're doing it on Zoom and people are like, what am I doing here? But once you start doing it, it's not very, very difficult. I think Mark's point about the survey being able to ask the question in different orders is also important to remove potential bias in that space. So whether that's flash vote, whether that's, you know, SurveyMonkey or whatever the case might be, is important to fit into that. And of course, what we just looked at here in Sudbury, if we can do that within a reasonable cost, is highly valuable. I really like the $100 question. I think that is a huge question that really makes people think about, this is not an endless amount of money. If I really have to think about how am I going to do this, it really kind of gives a great deal of insight into how the community would spend that money.
I mean, in terms of the random questions, if we just put things in alphabetical order and noted it, like to try to remove
That doesn't remove it.
it doesn't. Yeah.
So if you keep saying the same thing every time it's first.
Yeah, people are gonna look at what they look at first. Okay, well, I think this was a productive discussion. I think we definitely have directions to go. It went a lot better than I thought. I think we had Joe, that was great input, and even without all of us coming up with questions, it's always better to start with something. So now we have,
But thank you for doing the homework.
I was always someone who got my homework done. So now we have to review and approve minutes. And so if you go find the packets. if
Page
anyone-
12.
Yep, thank you.
Do you want to do agenda items first? That's your next.
Is that my next one? I
Yeah.
thought it was, you're getting, see, good thing you're checking me, because I looked. Okay, future agenda items. Well, I think we know our future agenda items. Fidel mentioned we're going to have, recreation, coming to speak to us at the next meeting.
That's correct. They will present where they are at with Birch Meadow. I will make sure that they touch on Imagination Station as well.
Yeah, do people even build playgrounds out of wood anymore? Because when I moved here, it was wood, and the town never maintained it, and it got rotted. And now they moved to all the plastic, and now we're turning the corner and going back to wood.
Exactly. It's the one that I can think of is the new playground next to the Children's Museum in Boston. How it's more earthy and more
Or the natural scape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I don't know. It's coming back.
Good. Okay, so we go ahead.
I did speak with Jean and Kevin briefly, and Fidel, thinking about. Sorry, I'm gonna talk on the senior side right now. So I'm wearing the hat. To think about feasibility study, but also to think about very specific needs that could be implemented now with some ARPA money. And I think it might be good for them to either provide some information or potentially even share that information in a presentation.
So part of that then would be the recreation, and then we got the school's input on time sensitive today. Now we'll get the town side just the general town side time sensitive. And I have as homework to take our list of all of the items and just at least try to collate them into buckets. And I'm just gonna go by I took some notes, but by what was here. And I think we could probably maybe revisit the survey, and maybe by the next meeting plan when the survey is going to go out.
That's great.
And
I once there's a quote, I can see what that is and share that
Yeah.
information.
that would
See
be
what
that would be good to know, because I guess say there was an expense, we can't just say, oh, can we spend ARPA money to fund the ARPA survey? I don't know. I guess we
The
need.
select board would have to allocate.
Yeah.
the
We would have to ask it, so we would be able to get that money till the 19th anyway. Then
Well, I think
Get a
Fidel,
trial basis or.
It'd be
Fidel has, Fidel has town manager money you can
And
use.
FinCom.
It's true. I mean,
and then
if
there's
it's
FinCom
small,
reserves.
let's
it's a
see
few
how much they want
$1,000,
to charge.
so
let's see what it is, right?
Yeah,
town
let's
can
give
fund
it.
it. Towns have money too.
Yeah,
So
I mean, we
can
don't
fund
want
it.
to. We hope it's not much. I don't know how much surveys cost. Well, you've been pricing senior center surveys, right? Or
No, not really.
you could use
Because
this
that's
for
a
senior
much,
center.
a much different outreach.
Okay.
But it's really interesting. I think I like the methodology.
It'd be
So
great.
let's see.
It'd be great to have a survey ready to go for town meeting and really advertise it at town meeting as well.
Oh,
Well,
absolutely.
I
If
think
there's
if
any
we-
way that we can do that.
If we define it,
Yeah, if it's
on
only
the
five,
12th, that we think we know what we want. We've got the $100 question, a couple of other ones, so we'll spend more time refining what's going to be on the list that they're going to check. So our goal will be by the end of the next meeting to have the buckets and the possible, like all the things that would be checked off on the survey, and we'll go through our ranking. Now, they won't be dollar amounts next to anything though, like on the survey.
Yeah.
It'll be the $100 question, and then ultimately we'll make a recommendation. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's a fairly full agenda with those presentations, and then getting back to the survey and planning. And we should have a backup plan if this flash vote comes up crazy expensive, the Survey Monkey's free.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
can find a way to duplicate the effect with Survey Monkey.
I feel like that Google Forms has really, grown a bit. I don't know if you used it before, but
Yeah, no, what I saw on here though is just crazy good, like, you know what I mean? And then we'll know for the future for other things, if it's reasonable, like $1,000 or something, it's probably not that, but just seeing the data that's in there and everything, it just seems like a massive step if we can just transition to that, depending on the dollar figure. If it's $40,000, it ain't happening.
Maybe we can see how they do it too. We can find that out quickly. 'Cause it almost feels like they're gonna reach out to people as opposed to asking people to go to a website. That's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, we don't.
And that's also
need
more
them.
expensive.
Well, I can try to research how if Sudbury has in their minutes anywhere, you know, how did they decide to go with these people, and did they come up with the price? I'm good at finding that information. So it's an understatement, right? Okay.
It looks like they might have done a little bit of both. It says 790 responses by invited people, and then they said 40 other responses. So maybe they opened it up to other people as well.
Yeah, and I mean, with the population of Sudbury, I guess that's a good feedback. I'd like to have 1,000 or whatever, like Parkton.
I think we'll get it.
We'll get there.
They advertise getting it in 48 hours, just FYI.
Oh God, well, we don't want to harass people and get people to resent it. We're going to give them some time. Okay.
Fill it out at town meeting, you got
Yeah.
192 responses right there.
Yeah.
Well, we could get those little poll. We could have town meetings start and kick off the serve.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Kick
Yeah,
off with a little poll.
I
thing.
think
Bring it
maybe we
back in.
should temper our expectations and drop.
Yeah.
Rein it
yeah,
in
I
a little
know.
bit here.
Okay,
Not on the
so
warrant. Not on the
we've got
warrant.
our next agenda items. Okay, so now we can get to the minutes and we can hit our 9:40 adjournment date.
All right.
Time. So let me go to find which tab has the minutes.
Page 12.
Oops. Oh, I see. Yeah, the end of the packet has the Birch Meadow Master Plan. Thank you for including that,
You want a motion?
Fidel and Jackie.
Yes.
That's helpful.
Do you want a motion?
Yeah, if anyone has any comments on the minutes, or we can just have a motion.
Move to approve the Reading ARPA Advisory Committee minutes from March 23rd, 2022,
As
as written.
second.
Okay, and I'll do this right because we have one person remote. We have to do a roll call, so I'll start with the remote. Sean,
Yes?
Jeff,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
and Mary Ann. Yes. Okay, any other motions?
I move to adjourn. I move to adjourn the school committee. Seconded by Sean. Aaron?
Yay.
Sarah?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Tom? Aye. Adjourned.
Okay, any one last motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, I will roll call. Sean,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mary Ann, yes.
So tempted to
We
say
are
no.
adjourned.
Gavel and everything.